If everybody could take their seats, thank you. I guess we know who we are. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for being here today. As you know, this is a special meeting, and a special meeting by law and a special meeting by sentiment. As far as I know, this is a historic occasion. My memory is not perfect, but in the 37 years that I've been paying attention to the Board of Supervisors and the City Council, I don't recall a joint meeting happening before. If anybody has a different memory, raise your hand or forever hold your peace. So there's this kind of long-running myth that the city and county governments don't get along. It's not true. It's more like we just don't deal much with each other. The county has its issues and the city has its issues, and both of us are often too busy with those issues to work on a relationship. That changed about 4 years ago, almost exactly 4 years ago. Unfortunately, it took the death of Andy Lopez to spark that change, but it is something good that came out of that tragedy. The good resulted last week in the annexation of Roseland, and I think we should all give ourselves a hand for that. And just by the way, I'm looking for a Roseland resident to appoint to our Community Advisory Board, somebody who was ineligible by address up until last Wednesday. So if you're interested, see me or the city clerk. Today's meeting was planned long before the fire. Of course, the fire makes this more timely. But even without that disaster, we face issues such as housing and homelessness that don't pay any attention to jurisdictional lines. And we, as the elected leaders of the city and county and members of our staff, feel that there may be efficiencies to be gained and better outcomes to be achieved if we can find ways to work together more often and better. So here we are to talk about those issues today. Before I turn it over to Chairwoman Zane for an opening comment, I want to talk a little bit about today's format. This is a special meeting, and we will conduct it as a workshop between the two elected bodies and our staffs. I want to apologize right up front for any of us who have our backs turned to you, but we certainly appreciate that you're here. We're not going to take any action today as a collective body or as individual bodies, but we may give direction to our staff. At the end of the workshop, we'll hear comments from the public. Those comments must relate to the subjects that are covered by this special meeting. With that, I'll turn it over to Chairwoman Shirley Zane.
Thank you, Mayor Kersey. I think you took most of my talking points, so my speech will be a little bit shorter. First of all, I wanted to welcome everybody here, and I wanted to especially welcome my colleagues who we all work so hard to make this a better place. The City of Santa Rosa and the County of Sonoma, and it really is a joy to sit down together as a team, because even though there are jurisdictional boundaries between us, the intent and motive of what we all have is really we carry with our hearts, which is how can we make this a better place? And we're facing some really tough times right now in terms of the disaster that we all experienced only a month ago. It's hard to believe because it was just a little over a month ago that we really were a different county and a different city. And now we've got a lot of pain, we have grief, we have trauma, and we have recovery and rebuilding. And what I want to share with you is that these two bodies sitting here today have a unified vision. We care about rebuilding. We want to build better. We want to build smart. We want to build fast. We want to get people back into their lives. Because when those homes burned down, it wasn't just structures, it was lives. And that's what we care about. We're here to serve you. And I want to thank my colleagues for the last 4 weeks, because I've seen you guys everywhere. And the county and the city has never seen so much of each other before, but that's a good thing, because as the mayor stated, things did change 4 years ago during the Lopez shooting. We did realize that we needed one another in a whole new way. And so it is a new day between the city and the county, and we have a lot of work to do. And even though you elected us to office, we can't do that without talented staff, and we can't do that without committed residents and citizens who live here. So we need you as much as you need us. And I promise you, we will continue to hold a unified vision. And to the best of our ability, we will let those so-called arbitrary boundaries drop, and maybe even drop our political egos enough to make sure that we rebuild as expediently and as successfully as possible. So it is a special meeting, as the mayor stated, and we do have mainly 3 things on the agenda today, and we're going to hear from some speakers. And we do want to start with the fire recovery update. And there will be a short presentation by the director of the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, and also a joint staff meeting, briefing from the county and the city. So we're going to start with Mark Girladucci, and I did practice that a few times, but the mayor helped me there. Girladucci, and there you are. Come on up, Mark. And we have seen so much of Mark in the last month, and we're so happy we see him because we need him. The Governor's Office of Emergency Services is really our lifeline right now, and they are overseeing the debris removal. They are overseeing housing with FEMA. We just could not do this rebuild without our state and our federal partners. We're so glad that they're here. And I think Mr. Girladucci has some very hopeful news to share with us today, as well as an update. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you, and thank you so much for being here.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Supervisor. Appreciate it very much. With me is Bill Roach. Bill is the federal coordinating officer from FEMA. Bill was appointed by the president to coordinate the federal response and work with the state in being able to address the various issues and challenges that we are working on this together. Let me start off by just, again, thanking you for coming together. I want to tell you, in my role as director of OES, I manage a lot of disasters throughout the state of California, and in my career across the country. I can tell you that the way you've come together as a community, the way you are working together in your effort to share experiences and begin the rebuilding process is phenomenal. You know, the fire itself occurred and really knew no boundaries. And the way that you've come together in a unified way, the way the city and the county have come together, is the appropriate and most beneficial way in helping to rebuild and recover after this disaster. And so, moving forward, it's important to understand that the solutions that we bring to the table as government are not the sole solutions. We are a component. But these type of events and the recovery are really done in what we call a whole of community effort. Whole of community, public, private, non-governmental, faith-based, and you, the residents of the community, all coming together to help, to share, and to rebuild and provide that guidance moving forward. I can tell you time and time again, I've seen this time and time again, our communities come back stronger, more resilient, and even better than they were before the disaster occurred. To help you get there, our role is really going to be to continue to work in support of the county and the city to be able to address the needs, to help the county and the city begin that recovering process. We're doing this in a way from the beginning of the fires, not only in coordinating the overall response of all the fire and all of the EMS and law enforcement, all the activities that took place, but then transitioning into this recovery operation. And to do that, much like we worked with here in the city, we've built several task forces at the state level, which are state and federal, and tie in through your local task forces. A task force on housing, a task force on medical and health care, a task force on debris management, a task force on schools, and then ultimately a long-range financial task force to be able to address what the needs are that the county and the city are going to need moving forward in the ensuing year and years to make sure that this community gets rebuilt. And let's make no mistake about it. This is no small disaster. This is no small challenge. There will be tough days moving forward, but we are working together to minimize those tough days and address this in a very expeditious manner. And I want to emphasize expeditious manner. We have been really working very diligently to stay out in front of this evolving circumstance. That means that we don't want to be late to need, late to challenges that you all face. We understand and believe that as we stay out in front of this and work with your local representatives to fill those gaps, we do it fast, we do it efficient, and in the end, it is your government working in the best interest of you, the community, and your economic base, which is very, very important for the long run. And I will commit to you, as I've committed from the beginning, that this effort will be done in a very expeditious manner. And we've done that in areas like working extensively to get the household hazardous wastes removed from your homes. In fact, we have built a multi-phased approach to being able to get the community clean and cleared. The first phase is to work through a tasking and going to our partners at FEMA, which, by the way, FEMA has been an unbelievable partner in this whole process. They're a great resource, and they're with us every step of the way. And they have not been short on any resource that we've asked for. But working with them, we have tasked the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to go in and remove hazardous materials from the various properties. That remove those things like pesticides and paints and propanes and freon and those kinds of things that were considered hazardous materials. That was the first phase, and really we set a regressive metric for them, and I could tell you that they have actually exceeded their metric to this point. I think there's 6,153 parcels. 4,230 of those parcels have been cleared of household hazardous waste, and we know that they're way above, way in front of the metrics that we set forth, which is good because that allows us to rapidly get into the second phase. And the second phase is going in to be able to remove the debris, all the ash, all the fire debris, and get that out of the way so that the lots are cleared and clean and certified clean so that the rebuilding can begin. This is really important because the sooner we can get these lots cleared, the sooner we can mitigate any public health threat or public health emergency from all of the ash and the materials that are in the ash. And the sooner that the county and the city can collectively and unified way begin the process of doing their rebuilding. In getting there, we have worked with the city and county, and the governor has done a number of executive orders to clear the way through regulation, clear the way through administrative action, provide any resource necessary to ensure that the city and county have all of the items and resources that they need to achieve their objective. And we stand ready to continue to do that again, the governor does, as necessary as we move forward to clear any further hurdles or any legislative action that he may recommend to the legislature to help the city and county recover. I want to tell you that one of the most critical components to the Phase 2 and the debris clearance operation is, and many of you have heard, the need to get a right of entry form signed. That right of entry form is a critical document that opens the door for us to come in through the tasking to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and their contractors to come in and clear the lot of all this debris. That is really sort of the deciding factor of us moving rapidly forward. And it's important, and I encourage you all, and talking to your friends and your neighbors, to get those right of entry forms signed and submitted as soon as possible. In fact, there has been a deadline set of November the 13th for the need to get all those right of entry forms in. And so in the process of where we're at now, transitioning from Phase 1 to Phase 2 and getting the right of entry, we've already received, to this date, 2,058 right of entry forms. 2,058 right of entry. So we're getting there. But remember, we've got almost 6,000 parcels. So we've got a little ways to go. But we're not waiting. We are, where we can, beginning the debris clearance operation. And if I could, Kelly, do we have that video? Let me just show you a quick video of what they've accomplished as of today. They started this morning, beginning the process of clearing the lot in Coffee Park. And I want to get you a sense, just because I think a photo is worth 1,000 words, for you to get a good understanding of what it looks like when we come in and clear a lot and make that lot clean and secure for you moving forward. While Kelly's doing that, I can tell you as well, I can tell you as well that beyond the housing, and I'm going to have Bill talk quickly about some of the federal programs in a second here, about what you can expect from FEMA and the programs you're going to get. The other task forces have been very active, and as of today, we're really happy to report that all the schools that were closed, the students that were out of schools have been put back into schools. We've worked with the superintendent of public instruction at the state and at the local levels to ensure that those students have a classroom to go to, and in some cases they're doubling up. In some cases we're moving in portables, but the key is to rapidly get them back into schools. One of the most important things that we can do as a community to get people's lives back in and back into a place where they're feeling more comfortable. The other piece is the watershed, which has been very critical.
Could we get the lights dim just for a minute so we can all see this? Because it's pretty cool. Yeah, there you go.
So, Kelly, you want to talk about where we're going to sit, sir?
So this is on Monticello Court just about 2.5 hours ago, and this is one of the Army Corps of Engineers contractors doing the final stages. The first stage, as the director described, was getting the household hazardous waste off. Then they put a little sign up that says this is ready to go. So this homeowner here signed the right of entry. They came on, sorted all of the different debris on the property from metals to other things. They load it up into trucks and take it to the proper landfill. This last part is where they have the remaining ash and dirt that's mixed together, and they're spraying it down to make sure it doesn't get up into the dust, create dust and get all over the place, but they're still using the hazardous suits so they're not getting and breathing it in. And then as you can see here, here's a truck backing in. And what they'll do is they'll line this truck with plastic, scoop the remaining ash and dirt mixture into the truck, and then they're done for this lot. So this would be one of the first examples.
So I wanted you to see that so you could understand what it looks like when we clean and certify a lot, and how those lots, as you can imagine, once we get all those lots cleared, that lot is ready to be rebuilt on, and you can begin that process. The other piece is the debris clearance from the Mark West Creek along the Mark West Road. And there's been a lot of effort because of some of the rains that are coming for us to do an immediate mitigation effort along that area. And we've had crews in there from the CAL FIRE to the CCCs to Caltrans and local water districts and environmental protection groups going in to do immediate mitigation and remediation work to ensure that any debris that is in and around the watershed doesn't roll into the water. And so they've been working at that the last couple of days, and will continue to. They've got roughly about a 3-mile section left to go, and they'll be complete from that mitigation. And that's important because we know that there are certain key areas outside of the larger watershed that have an immediate threat to the water and the headwaters, et cetera. So we want to make sure that we're working on that. So debris, the phases, getting in those ROEs so we can get everybody's lot cleared, registering with FEMA, which Bill's going to talk about quickly, and getting into the programs. Even if you have insurance, it's important to register. And understanding that our other components of our community, our watershed, our environment, our schools, and then the infrastructure is the last piece, are being accounted for. And all of this is being done roughly within a month of the actual event taking place. So with that, let me just ask Bill to talk about the federal programs a little bit.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here. As a fellow Californian, it's important, not only for me, but the team that we brought in here, to make sure that we can see some good come from bad. And we're here in full support of Mark, California Office of Emergency Services, and the local governments especially. This really needs to be a bottom-up approach, working together across, whether it's the debris component or the housing component, and working together to help you all in a whole community environment solve for the issues that surround the recovery piece of this. Mark asked me to talk about some of the programs that FEMA brings is the Individual Assistance Program. And with that, I want to share some statistics. It's about registering for the program to get that federal assistance. And to date, I think we have over 15,000 applications, people registering in Sonoma County. Within that, we've already dispersed over $5 million in individual monies to those individuals. And over 6,500 people have visited the local assistance centers and the disaster recovery assistance centers. So that's all good news. One thing is, if you haven't registered, register, okay? It's the only way we can recognize what your needs are and help and max out, have you max the federal programs available to you. Mark also talked about the debris and what's going on in the debris. So debris falls under the public assistance program. So that has been turned on as well for category A and B, where category A is the debris removal and category B is emergency protective measures. So Mark indicated there's a lot of activity with protection of the watershed and from rains in those denuded areas. All those, there's the federal cost share involved in that, along with the states to help reimburse for those costs to take those actions. Some of the housing, within the housing programs, we have a direct housing program that includes direct lease, access to mobile housing units or RVs, recreational vehicles. Those are all options that we're going to use to try to get those eligible applicants into some interim housing so they're in a safe place, safe and sound, while they go to the longer and much longer rebuild component of this. So it will house these people up to 18 months and extensions beyond that if required, so while they're rebuilding their homes, and all those things are available. So Mark, I think I'll stop there, and if there's any questions, I'm sure we can field them later.
Yeah, so we're gonna take turns in terms of the board and the council and seeing whether there's questions. So I'm going to, for the director, so I'm going to turn to my board first and see if there's any questions. Supervisor Gorin?
Thank you for showing us the video. It was very helpful, except that I'm a little confused. It looks like you've cleared the entire lot, and the information that you've been given is that you're going to really just clear around the foundation or however far you think there are toxics. So is there a reason why it looked like the entire lot was cleared, and is that what we can expect from all of the lots?
I think every lot is going to have its unique set of circumstances about what the debris looks like and how widespread it is. We've been clear that we will certify that lot as clean when we're done with it. It does if there's just a foundation, that foundation is removed, and then any surface debris that's on there is removed. I didn't know what that lot looked like beforehand, except probably looked like the lots that are next to it, and they make that determination there, and they remove what is considered the debris, hazardous material, and the areas that would allow it to be safe and certified clean.
Thank you. And a follow-up question is, you've led us to believe that you will not provide fill dirt on top of what you scraped off. Is that true, or are you going to take it down to 4 or 6 inches and then the homeowner or the builder will have to supplement? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, speak right in.
I'll have to eat the mic. Thank you. I appreciate that. My question was about cleanup, which you answered, and are you going to refill the dirt that you scraped off when you're cleaning up?
So regarding the fill dirt, we do not provide the fill dirt after it gets cleared off. That material comes out, and then that is then as they do the rebuilding process, they come back in. That's engineering that needs to take place afterwards to secure the appropriate up-to-code foundation that needs to be put in place for the rebuilding of a home with the new, most current 2017 building code standards. You're welcome.
Any questions from the council? Mr. Rogers.
Yes, thank you. The first question that I have is more of a general one. We've been hearing in terms of timeline that the debris cleanup should be completed by the beginning of 2018. We were hearing that about 2 weeks ago. Is that still on track to be the timeline, assuming people get their right of entry forms in?
So the answer is yes. That is still the metric that we are shooting for. Again, a lot depends upon the right of entry forms and getting enough of those right of entry forms in place to be able to effectively meet that metric. But I could tell you, as everything we briefed on today, what you're seeing, we are leaning as forward as possible to try to meet that metric and get the lots cleared by early 2018.
All right. Could you talk also a little bit about the trees? So I remember in Lake County, it was a significant issue dealing with having independent arborists come in and assess whether a tree should be removed or not. Is that part of the debris cleanup process as well, or is that taken into account during the rebuild?
So the private property debris removal policy only speaks to the removal of trees on those private properties that are in the way and threaten doing the work or the accessibility to those lots, right? So as they come on those lots, they're going to take down, right, those trees in order to perform the work on the lots. I know because in my day job in the region, I'm the recovery division director, well aware of the Calaveras and Lake and all that tree stuff and some of the challenges that happen there because of the circumstances and the environment of where this fire burned. It's mostly on the private property debris removal stuff is we're focused on clearing those lots, and if those trees are in the way, they'll be taken.
Yes, Supervisor Gore?
Yeah, Director Ghilarducci, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. There's one question that I have with respect to the closure of the FEMA and Cal OES incident, right? Actually, you guys have been great about staying with us and working with us, not only through the registrations that need to come through FEMA and through Cal OES, debris removal and all these things, also deployment of the watershed emergency response teams, WERT, as we call them, affectionately. But outside of that, for the county and for, I think, the city, it was a little bit of, I can't speak for the city, a surprise to have that, to be told that that was closed. We haven't seen anything that shows us that the closure of that incident comes with a lack of services or a lack of commitment or a closing down of the situation. But can you just clarify what that means? Because we're getting questions from people out in the community about that.
Absolutely. It's a great question. So the incident period, this was a wildland fire disaster, and the incident period is based upon when the fire started and when the fires were 100% contained. And so that is the period of time that the incident is determined to be open and closed. Now, that is different. What happens all in between that time, the emergency response, the debris removal, the programs that FEMA have put in place, the watershed management, and actions that have been taken. This is another reason why it is really important for the county and the city to rapidly take action to mitigate the various situations, whether it's watershed, whether it's debris, whether it's infrastructure damage, is because those are all eligible within the programs and the Stafford Act and what's considered within that that incident period. And so all of those actions have been taking place. And because of that, they'll continue to take place. And some of those that are started now will go on for months and maybe even years, which will still be part of that. The incident period really is speaking to the fire-specific period.
Councilor, are there other questions? Ms. Combs.
Thank you very much for being here and for the remarkable eat the mic.
The mic.
Pull the whole thing towards you.
Gotcha. Is that better? Okay. Thank you very much for being here and for the speedy response that we're seeing with the cleanup. I have a question because a number of folks who live adjacent to fire damaged areas but who aren't necessarily damaged themselves have concerns about the air quality in their own homes. So what's the process if the air quality monitors are triggered to indicate that perhaps there's something unsafe? If there were something unsafe, what would the process be? And how does a neighbor understand what that process is?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So we have between the state and our partners, the federal government, working with your local air quality management district, we have put in air monitors throughout the region, as well as where they're doing the debris removal as dust and other kinds of things. You saw them putting water on there to minimize the dust. But we monitor and doing air monitoring throughout the region, that there's a coordination, just much like you see the coordination around this table, there's a coordination that's taking place each and every day with the Department of Public Health and the air quality districts down to your local folks to be able to ensure that if there are reports that are generated each day. If we see an indicator that determines that there's something in the air quality, then we would work back through your local air quality and public health, and we would go and work with the community member or the community area that would be impacted. But to this point, we have not seen any of that.
Are those reports available, for example, online?
I believe they are, and I could get that specifically for you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Supervisor Hopkins, yes.
Along those lines, will there be any additional water quality testing done as the rains come, particularly in the Mark West watershed and the Russian River watershed, to see if there is any potential contamination in those water bodies as a result of the debris?
So certainly the county, working with us can provide for those tests, and if they didn't have the resources to do it, they could ask us, and we'd be happy to do it. And we're doing that in a couple of different water areas, water reservoirs, I guess you should say, in different parts of the fire area, Napa and Mendocino as well. So that would be fine to be able to do that.
Council, further questions?
Any further questions from the board? Supervisor Rabbit?
Yeah, just to follow up on the watershed issues. I know that EPA, because of the health emergency, was allowed to go on private property and do cleanup. Is there any mechanism in place, I'm thinking some of the more remote hillside areas in the county, to have watershed protection folks go into those properties without perhaps specific authority of the property owner to take care of? I mean, there's some houses that are on creeks or some houses that really do need to get some. I can't imagine too many property owners really objecting to additional straw wattles and.
A great question, and so what we've done there is we've had these special assessment teams, strike teams, if you would, going out and assessing those areas, just as you described, where you've got maybe a structure that has come down that is adjacent to a waterway or a stream or a creek. In those cases, what we're doing is we are going on to do emergency protective measures for the sake of public health and safety, and we are securing those areas both with straw wattles, but we also have been using a approved spray that sprays on there and it holds the material in place so that when the rains come, it doesn't go all flowing into the water area, and then they may be removing a little bit of debris around those areas just to make sure that it's not going to roll into the creek or the waterway. And this is what we've been doing in all of the counties that have been impacted by the fires. Now that's different than the larger debris. When they're ready to come in and do the complete debris removal, then they would need a right of entry form to do that. But for the emergency protective measures, we're just doing that along those areas.
And I just have one more question. Do you know if anyone here has right of entry forms available?
I thought they were on the back, but no, they're not here.
We'll
If we
find
don't
out
before the
if
end of
we
the
do
meeting,
have-
we need to have right of entry forms.
Yeah.
for
Yes,
people
we
to
should
sign,
have
please.
them. We should have them here.
thank
Absolutely,
you.
on the
That's a
back
great
as you
question,
leave.
Mayor. Thank
Yeah,
you
it's a
very
great question. Yeah.
And,
So,
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Just, I know there are a lot of questions from the council, from the board, from the public about debris removal still. We had a very well-attended information fair last night at the Vets Building. There are going to be 2 more chances at that this weekend, on Saturday morning in this room before the Sonoma Strong event in Courthouse Square, and then on Sunday from 11 to 3 again at the Vets Building. And trying to do a longer period of time to spread it out so the lines are not so long, so the crowd is not so big all at one time. So we'll have that information on the SonomaCountyRecovers.org website as well.
And we also are aware that we needed more staff from the Corps of Engineers, so there will be a lot more staff available to answer questions, again, Saturday morning or Sunday morning to afternoon at the Vets Hall, and then Saturday it is here. So, and that'll all go up on the Sonoma CountyRecovery.org site as well. Mr. Girladucci, Director Dick Girladucci, I just want to thank you on behalf of all of our citizens. We are so glad that you are here and FEMA is here, and I'd like to give him some applause as he leaves. I know you need to get back to Sacramento, and we've got 2 other brief presentations from the county and from the city on recovery events. And Mr. Peter Rumble, who is our recovery director, is going to give a brief presentation. And then Sean McGlynn, city manager, will be giving a presentation.
I
You will
don't have
not.
a presentation. I think this covered the
Okay,
presentation
great.
that would have been the talking
Great.
point.
Another good example of the county and city working together for efficiency.
No, I think so. Thank you. For people to see,
Yeah,
that would be
okay,
good.
so he's going to pull up a couple of slides, so we will need the lights dim so people can see. Oh, okay, great. This is your children's playlist, yeah.
Oh,
Not it. Yeah, we want to see Mr. Scruff, yeah.
those pictures, well, I'm hoping the pictures turn out better. I'll move quickly through these slides. I think the director and our FEMA partner covered a lot of the updates that I have. But I want to, yeah, the graphics aren't fantastic, but I'll run through the data itself. I think it's important while we understand kind of what's happening on the recovery front, just exactly what we're dealing with. And I know everybody is experiencing this fire on a personal level in their own way, either through direct loss or, in my case, most of my friends losing homes. So there's a lot of just sort of intense personal understanding of the event, but I think it's important to understand the totality as well. This is the largest natural disaster in California history. We have over 110,000, almost 111,000 acres burned, which is roughly equivalent to 173 square miles. And for context, that's larger than the city of Atlanta. That's larger than the city of New Orleans. That's several times the size of the city and county of San Francisco. We have well up into the 6,000s in terms of structures destroyed. The fortunate thing is we do have the fires 100% contained. A couple of points just to go into the impact a little bit further. There's a tremendous amount of homes lost, and we're projecting around 5,000 units that we need to accommodate for. And that's just completely destroyed. And we have many more homes that have suffered some damage. We are around the mark of $3 billion in economic impact, and some projections have that tallied to about $4.6 billion when all the figures are accounted for. As was mentioned, there are 15,000, a little over 15,000 people registered for FEMA. Over 5 million in individual support, almost 3 million in housing support, and another 2 million in other cash support. And this is the type of support that people need for medical expenses, for personal items, things that don't necessarily fall into the housing category. And as I mentioned before, these are not only the largest natural disaster in California history, but the largest, the costliest in U.S. history.
Keep going. Keep going.
Yep. And so I wanted to focus down on some of the neighborhoods, and this isn't a complete listing of maps, but I wanted to show in a little bit more detail about the actual neighborhood impact here. And for the Tubbs fire, we have about 55,000 structures destroyed. For the Nuns, we have about 1,000 structures destroyed. All those little dots, the sort of chicken pox map, you could see all the structures. Looking at a Coffee Park neighborhood in particular, with 1,500 structures destroyed. This is mostly a residential neighborhood, as you know, and almost 3,000 residents displaced from this. In Fountain Grove, about 18,000 structures destroyed. 1,800, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's been a long day. Larkfield Wickiup, 750 structures. Annandale Kenwood, we talk a lot about Santa Rosa, but this is absolutely a county-wide event. 75 homes on the Bennett Ridge neighborhood. In Oakmont, as our board knows, all too keenly, 2 homes destroyed. And I wanted to provide our overall work in a little bit of context. The immediate response is that sharp red bump at the beginning. In recovery, what we're at now is a multi-year process, and we're just starting our recovery efforts. As the director noted, we're just a month into the disaster, and we're still very much in response mode. These recovery activities that we're taking are very much still in response mode, and we need to understand that this is a long-term process, and we'll be in the business of recovery for many more years. This graphic I am already seeing is not going to come through well. I'm sorry for the AV. But this is a graphic that shows how intensely our efforts are over the last month. Literally day by day, we are taking multiple actions both on the response and recovery front. I wanted to note the task force structure, because this is where our work on the local level really connects with the resources and support at the state and federal level. As the director mentioned, we have 6 task forces stood up: debris, housing, watershed, schools, and very recently economic development and health and human services. I think the director provided a fairly succinct overview of our activity there. The key point that I want to leave everyone with is we're taking active measures every day, and have been over the last several weeks, to advance recovery. So we're making placements into temporary housing. We're putting mitigation measures on the ground. And this isn't just through sort of the quote-unquote official agency response. I've already seen community partners in the audience now who are doing an incredible job, particularly on the watershed issue, making sure that we are protecting our watershed through every means possible. And with that, I think I'll make sure that I'm not the talking head and pass it over to Sean, and then allow the...
No, he's not going to speak. So
okay.
You can turn the
Then
lights
I
back
definitely
on.
don't
We'll
want to
take
be the talking head.
questions. Yeah, so you are the talking head. Yeah. So if there are any questions from the board or the council, any questions for Mr. Rumble for the board? Nope, nothing there. Okay.
From the council, any questions? All right. I just want to reiterate that we're going to take comment from the public at the end of this workshop. I know, again, that there are a lot of questions out there about fire recovery, debris cleanup, right of entry forms, and all the rest. The time to ask those questions will not be today. This isn't going to be a question and answer session. It's a workshop for the council and the board. The time to answer those questions, Saturday morning, right in this room, before the Sonoma Strong event in Courthouse Square. Can anybody tell me what time that starts, so people will know how long this meeting may be going?
8 a.m.
8 a.m. to...
8 a.m. in the Courthouse Square?
Oh, no, the Courthouse Square
Yes.
event?
So this room opens at 8 a.m. on Saturday?
Yes,
8 to
8 a.m.
10.
to 10 a.m. in this
8
room.
a.m. to 10 a.m. Thank
What's
you.
the Courthouse Square, though, event? I think people were asking. Yeah. 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. in Sonoma Strong in Courthouse Square.
When is the resource fair? 8 to 10 in Courthouse Square.
No, here.
8 to 10 here.
You're good.
8 to 10 here. Is there a resource fair in the vets?
Sunday.
Jennifer, come up to a microphone,
Yeah,
please.
come on up, Rebecca. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah.
Okay, so there will be a resource fair on Saturday in this room from 10 a.m. to noon, followed by the Sonoma Strong event in the square from 1 to 5 p.m. There will be an additional resource fair held on Sunday at the Vets Building from 11 to 3 p.m.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, this is about debris removal and getting your ROE and your right of entry. So we will help you with that. We'll have lots more staff in terms of the Corps of Engineers, and you can drop in either on Sunday from 11 to 3 or here in this room from 8 to 10 on Saturday.
10. From 10 to 12.
You just changed it.
Nope.
Okay, got it.
10 to 12 on Saturday, 11 to 3 on Sunday.
Okay,
Thank you, Rebecca.
Got it.
And I'm sorry for calling you Jennifer.
we'll get it. All right, thank you. And so that is the report from both the county and the city. And so now we're going to go ahead and move it to the third item, which is a discussion on enhanced infrastructure financing district. And I will pass it back to the mayor.
Mr. McGlynn.
Staff is coming up to do the presentation, and they will introduce themselves when they get to the podium. I believe that this was a topic that we had already scheduled for the conversation.
That's correct.
Prior to, but it is one of the crucial questions that needs to be answered as we move forward as a community. Infrastructure is often the thing that is the most difficult thing to finance, and I think that I'm going to turn it over to the county and city folks to make this presentation. But it is even more pertinent now, if it could have been, than it was when we had originally scheduled this a couple of months ago.
Good afternoon. I'm Caroline Judy. I'm the Director of General Services for the County of Sonoma. And today with my colleague David Guin, we're going to talk a little bit about one of the mechanisms that the county and the city may want to consider using to assist us in the long-term recovery. So enhanced infrastructure financing districts are a mechanism that was created in the post-redevelopment world, signed into law by the governor in 2015. They were modified in two different subsequent legislative actions, AB 2 and AB 313. And they were enacted from legislation SB 628. They have allowed governmental jurisdictions, I'm sorry? Oh, okay. They're a very flexible financing mechanism, and they're a flexible financing mechanism that can be used by jurisdictions for various types of financing for infrastructure investments. And as the City Council and as the board consider the long-term recovery and are looking at housing and various other types of investments in infrastructure, this mechanism is one of the very important ones that we wanted to bring to your attention so that we could get further direction on how to move forward. There are advantages and disadvantages of using enhanced infrastructure financing districts. We've outlined some of the pros and cons, won't go into great detail on those, but just wanted to provide you some basic information on them. David.
So again, I'm David Guin, the Director of Planning and Economic Development for the City of Santa Rosa. And what we want to do is provide a little concept of what this means, an Enhanced Infrastructure Finance District. Basically, it's a tax increment. So the base tax level, which is represented by the greenhouses up above, is what the base property tax level is for that the cities and counties are receiving. As we develop in those areas, additional tax revenue will be generated from the additional property values that are added to the city or the county. The idea is that the city and county would work together to identify how to use that additional tax revenue that comes in over and beyond the baseline and distribute that to the general funds to help pay for services that are critical from the city and county, and then a portion of that to go to pay for the infrastructure to help support housing development and other activities. The way that these can be used is fairly broad. It could be used for affordable housing, it could be used for water and sewer infrastructure, environmental mitigations, transit-oriented projects, transit stations, parking facilities. So it has a pretty broad range of uses, but what it does is it allows that cost to be leveraged from the tax increment, reducing the cost to the housing development component, and hopefully encouraging more housing to be built. The way we would look at this is working with the county, the city and county. It's better as a partnership. Again, that tax increment working together, we can leverage more and achieve more together. So what we're recommending is if there's direction from the the board and the city council is to start looking into the feasibility of what this would look like, what the districts would look like, what type of increment would be generated, and what we could potentially get done with that increment to support housing development as we move into the long-range housing plans for the city and the county. And then after that feasibility analysis, we'd come back to the city council and the board of supervisors, identify is this a good choice, and then move forward with the infrastructure plan on what those projects are and start to move off.
So thank you. So as Sean mentioned. As Sean mentioned, part of the reason that we're bringing this to your attention is just it's one of the mechanisms that can be used to help pay for some of the infrastructure investments that are necessary for long-term housing recovery. And so that's why we're here today.
And if I can, I'm actually going to challenge both governing bodies because I believe this is someplace where you can work together. So I'm not going to take credit for the title of this, but somebody today mentioned that what we really need, because this process that you've seen in front of you requires voter approval. Some locations that we would have would require the property owners in that location to approve that. That's a long, long road to go. I do not believe that we have a long, long time to address these issues. What I would be asking is that the council and the Board of Supervisors find some way to come together, whether that's through an ad hoc committee, to talk about visioning, and in fact, push something like a rapid rehousing redevelopment district. I know redevelopment has a bad connotation for some folks, maybe even our governor, but this is a place where action is required. We can't wait for a vote. This is the place where visioning can take place between both bodies. A special consideration can be asked of this particular item, and this can be a way to push forward the community, not just the areas of impact that have been burned, but the opportunities that lie in our community beyond that specific place. This is where I believe both bodies need to invest their time, invest their energy in advancing a vision for the county, advancing a vision for the community, and this is the type of key choice that could be made, demanded of this state to recognize the special circumstance we find ourselves in, where where 5% of the housing stock of Santa Rosa is destroyed in an environment where there wasn't enough housing to begin with. Challenge our state leadership, both of the governing bodies to come together, take on this mantle, take on something like this to say, we want this rapid rehousing redevelopment district today.
Mr. McGlynn, thank you for the passion there. I agree that this is important, and it's something that we needed to do 4 weeks ago. It's more necessary now. But I'd like to ask our staff, and I don't care who it is, but to make clear the distinction or not between rebuilding 3,000 houses that we lost in Santa Rosa and 5,000 plus countywide, and what we're looking at doing with this, whether those overlap, whether they're separate, and if possible, maybe even give us an example, a hypothetical of what something like that might look like. So we all in this room have a better understanding of what we're talking about here.
So the boundaries for an enhanced infrastructure financing district can be determined by your elected officials. They can be narrowly construed or they can be broadly construed. So it depends upon the goals and objectives of the elected officials and what we want to try to accomplish with the enhanced infrastructure financing district. So just a couple of examples. The city of Santa Rosa, City of Santa Clara used the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District to help pay for the Levi's Stadium. They used that as a mechanism. That was a single project.
Bad example. I'm not a 49ers fan.
Many of us, maybe Raiders fans instead of 49ers fans. Anyhow, that was a single project. It was used in that manner to drive forward that particular stadium project. It's been used in other areas much more broadly. City of Los Angeles has used it to do transit-oriented development, to do housing, to do roads improvements, to do transit stations, et cetera. So it can be flexibly tailored to the needs of the local jurisdiction, and that's really somewhat of the beauty of it. It sort of depends upon what our goals and objectives are.
But I would like to add that for it to be successful and the increment to be large enough, and I think this is the question in front of both the bodies, is the increment needs to be a joint venture between the municipality and the county. There wouldn't be enough increment thrown if any one body went by itself, one jurisdiction went by itself. It requires both jurisdictions to work together to create the enough investment capital to have this particular endeavor work.
And again, for clarification, is this a tax increase?
It's not a tax increase. What it does is it takes the tax increment from new development rather than just all going into the general fund. We specify where we want it to go and how we want it to be used to benefit future development. So future development of housing. So another example could be to increase the amount of affordable housing that is done as part of housing projects, and to help support more densification of housing in the urban setting to provide additional housing as we rebuild the rest of Santa Rosa. So the areas that were burned. So we want to work together both rebuilding, but we also need to build for the housing that we've had a severe shortage of before 4 weeks ago.
So just for example, if say we had a parking lot downtown that got turned into a higher density, affordable, or mixed use housing project, the value of that land being increased by that development would increase the tax base, and those taxes that could then be put to use on something else even more advantageous to the community and build on that, and it snowballs upward.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. All right, I've monopolized the microphone enough. I'll let Chair Zane ask the board.
I think one of the things that we are looking for in bringing us together is to be able to have our two bodies under the Brown Act to be able to really dialogue about this, because as the city manager put it forward, it is a great opportunity to build housing and infrastructure. So I know there's questions, so I'm going to go ahead and turn to the board, and I'll start there with you, Supervisor Gorin.
Thank you. I appreciate your passion and the complexity and the priority of building housing in the city. It not only benefits the city residents, but folks in the county who may have lost their homes. So I represent the 1st District, Eastern Santa Rosa, 2,900 structures, probably a little less in housing, 2,500. A small part of that is in the city. And so part of the discussion that the county needs to have is, if we define the boundaries as just being the city of Santa Rosa, and maybe that's appropriate, what will happen with Kenwood, Glen Ellen, Mark West area, how will we finance the improvements for those areas that lost huge numbers of homes in the county?
Okay, good question. And?
Again, I think we're going to take into account all the input we get again at this point, and we'll evaluate that and look at the boundaries. As Caroline mentioned, the boundaries are developed through a process. We'll get input from the elected officials, and then those boundaries will be approved prior to developing. But we're going to take that feedback in.
Thank you. That I won't expect a question, but you know where my interest is. Large number of folks lost homes. Thanks.
And what I understood Mr. McGlynn to be saying is that we can draw the boundaries where we want to draw them. So I think that's encouraging. Yeah. So okay.
Council, are there questions? Mr. Rogers.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I understand this a little bit. Is the difference between the EIFD and the Community Facility District in Melrose, is it really in the funding option? And what I mean by that is, in a community facilities district in Melrose, it's through the issuance of municipal bonds. This is not funding the district through municipal bonds. It's funding it through the increased tax revenue within the district on the new development.
That's correct. It's funded off the increment. You can bond off that increment. That does require a vote, a 55% vote. But you can, otherwise, you can use just the increment off without that vote.
So it's essentially using your future earning potential to reinvest to try to grow your base.
Correct.
Okay. And you have a number of the potential areas of investment that are here. One of the things that I'd be interested in us looking at with our housing, I've been particularly concerned in the rebuild on the difference between when we talk about rebuilding better and in a more efficient and resilient manner, that all of that is potentially added cost on top of the homeowners who may or may not have their insurance covering the cost for them to rebuild what they've lost. I'd like us to look at this as an option for how we get to that better part of that equation, looking at resiliency and better greenhouse gas reduction programs through incentives through this program that might be able to fund it as well.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
So thank you. Supervisor Rabbit, then Supervisor Hopkins, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. And I think the other piece of this that we need to look at is if we're talking about infrastructure, what's really true of all of us, and I think this is throughout California, certainly since Prop 13, it goes way back, the way that we finance cities has changed drastically in counties. Prop 13 changed the landscape dramatically. We've never really recovered from that, but we hid behind redevelopment. And then when redevelopment went away, it really was stripped bare. You look at my hometown of Petaluma, which if you were down there, you would think it was thriving. In 2 years' time, is going to go in the red. That is not a healthy place to be. And since then, I will say that all of us have put a lot of the costs of infrastructure on every development project that comes through. And that's something that we need to look at going forward. I give an example. I had a meeting. There's a 184 unit downtown, no opposition from neighbors, transit-oriented development that has $9 million of offsite improvements that the city is trying to get out of it, plus another $7 million of development impact fees. That's $87,000 a door before you even build the building. And then we wonder why our housing costs are so expensive, and trying to and then you put 20% of affordable housing in there, and that increases each unit subsequently, and so on and so forth. So I'm not opposed to this. I just think it shouldn't just be a diversion of the monies that we should be putting into that infrastructure in the first place, coming out of a different pot. I think if you really want to incentivize the building, we can really look at that type of, infrastructure improvements that are totally off property, that are lovely to have, but not necessary for that development. And part of it has to do with the nexus between the two, and the fact that, people will end up doing it, but they'll end up selling the property for twice what we think it should be worth going forward. I mean, I could give you example after example in my own career as an architect, and a son of a quote-unquote developer from Ireland who ended up building in San Francisco. It's been going on for years in that fashion, and if you look at San Francisco prices, that's how you end up in that situation. And I think we really need to look at that hard and fast, to not just use this as another avenue to gather money to do projects that we can't do with any other dollars. And I will say something, and the idea that development needs to pay its own way is a great mantra, but this is what happens with it. It becomes unaffordable. And that's why there are thousands of units today available for building that aren't being built, because they don't pencil out yet, because the costs, that $87,000 a door, doesn't quite make sense until either the rents are going to go up or the property values are going to go up. And then we're going to cry about the amount of housing costs. So I think it's something to keep in mind. I'm not opposed to going after the idea of the tax increment. I think it's great. I just think it needs to be used in the right way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I want to echo some of the comments that you made, Supervisor Rabbit, in going forward with this, because I think there's a lot of things that we need to do within our own, at least speaking from the city's perspective, within our own city's department about making greater efficiencies and using various methods to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck and we're using our staff's time in the wisest way possible. One of the things that I've witnessed over the last year, being my first year on the council, is I ran on a platform of creating affordable housing, and the city council has a criteria established where projects that have the most affordable housing go to the top of the application pile. And what that's done is even though we've had developers with the best of intentions to build, we've also had developers come forward with project proposals with affordable housing built into it, with the intention to frankly just sell the property and the entitled property and make a buck, and nothing actually gets built. Meanwhile, our staff, which has been doing a yeoman's task and has put thousands of hours into actually building that housing, did really absolutely nothing to build affordable housing. And so one of the things that I'm going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks is putting a capital check on developers to make sure that in order to get staff's time, get that top of the pile preference, in addition to providing affordable housing, we'll also have to put forward some sort of proof that they have skin in the game to actually build a unit. Other things that I think we ought to be looking at is waiving fees in many cases, and capturing and collecting them post-occupancy of the unit, which also goes to what you were saying, Supervisor Rabbit, about making it easier for developers to pencil the project and get it going. But I do want to say that I'm very supportive of EIFDs. I was following it through the legislature when it was moving its way through, I think starting in 2014. I think that it has a lot to offer to Santa Rosa, but we are going to have to be really diligent about how those funds get spent, because the other question I have, and this is a question for you, Director Guin, is if we're using that tax increment, it's my understanding that otherwise in the future we would use that increment to reinvest in our roads, reinvest in those very things that property taxes pay for. And now that we just lost all this housing and all this property tax revenue, you know, I'm sure you haven't run the numbers, but I'll be really interested to see how we're going to prove that we can pay for this new construction and simultaneously also keep up the infrastructure that supports them.
Great. Supervisor Hopkins has a question, and then we'll go back and forth. I did want to announce, though, that the right of entry forms are now on the back table, so you can pick them up on your way out.
Supervisor Gore has to leave soon for a community meeting, so I'm going to let him go first, and then I'll go after.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Supervisor Hopkins. I apologize. As we know, there's so many meetings going on at once. There's a community meeting going on in my district with people who've lost their home, and I guess they're calling on that. And I think that's a great point to make, because all of us have been in this situation where the two bookends that have to guide us are taking care of the people who lost their homes so they don't become more victimized from process and from rebuild than anything. And then the second thing is this kind of using the shock to our system to shock the system. I just wanted to say, just respectfully, I'm fully on board with looking at an enhanced infrastructure financing district through the California Economic Summit and a lot of different avenues. We've identified and looked at models in San Diego to Truckee, from Los Angeles to other areas. And what it does basically is, as City Manager McGlynn is talking about and the others, is it creates a box that you can look at different financing options from within. So as you say, tax increment, yes, but it can also look at bonding based off of that too. The other thing that it can look at is, if you do so desire, it can usurp existing taxes that come out of that area. One thing we were looking at is in some of our unincorporated areas that are really kind of cities, like Mark West Wickiup, very impacted by this, is maybe that's a way to keep some of the transportation property taxes from going directly into a general fund and then us all having to fight back to do it. So I think that's the key, is we won't be able to identify what it is until we have good analysis, good structure on where it goes. But if we're going to be advocating for the state and the governor and others to be able to leverage something, we have to have a vehicle that can bring things together and leverage it. So thank you very much for bringing this forward. It's a great surprise. Thank you.
Mr. Sawyer, did you have a question?
Comment, not a question. I appreciate this coming forward as well. I think it gives us an opportunity to use this tool to, especially when it comes to city-centered growth, and to remove the negative element of sprawl in our city. It will give us an opportunity to take advantage of those models that have been successful across the state, to give us a successful mixed use, and affordable and market rate homes that the city so desperately needs. It has needed them for a long time, and I think it's time that we look at this model. It's important, of course, that we move cautiously, but we do need to move expeditiously. So I'm very thankful that this has come forward, and I look forward to the research and recommendations in the future.
Supervisor Hopkins? Thank you. First, I just have a clarifying question and some comments to follow up, and that's that my understanding of EIFDs was that if you've got an active redevelopment project in an area, that you can't put an EIFD overlay until that is completed. I know we've still got some activity in Roseland and other areas in Sonoma County, so just wondering how that factors into the conversation. The other thing is that, I'm one of the few folks in this room who represents a primarily rural constituency. And we don't have very many tools in our toolbox to address rural poverty. I've got schools that have, some of the highest rates of free and reduced lunches in the county, some of the highest rates of high school dropouts. And so we really struggle to find tools to enhance rural infrastructure. One of my concerns is that some of those rural areas actually do subsidize city services. Like you look at the Sea Ranch, for instance, which has a lot of property taxes coming in. They don't get a lot of services, which is fine. They're actually fine up there. Geyserville is another one, actually. I know Supervisor Gore just left, but Geyserville actually subsidizes the county fire system tremendously in terms of the tax revenue generation they bring in. So I guess my concern is that, if you've got an EIFD, you're keeping more resources within the city centers. What happens to rural services? I just want to be clear that I absolutely love Sean McGlynn's passion. I think this is fantastic. We need to build affordable housing, but it's not free because it will limit resources. It will limit, as Councilmember Tippett said, our ability to invest in roads and rural services and other things. And one of my concerns is then, are we going to start forming all of these out in rural areas too? And so rather than kind of looking at county-wide concerns, we're just sort of dividing up the pot and focusing on individual geographic areas, trying to keep their resources where they are. So love the need for affordable housing, love the concept, but also want to think about the impacts to other areas, where those lines will be drawn, and how we can still have toolboxes to fight those major social issues that we have outside of the city of Santa Rosa.
Council, Mr. Schwedhelm.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep. So you're correct. If there's an active redevelopment project going on, you can't have both at the same time. So we would again be looking at boundaries that address that. And again, the boundaries do not have to be contiguous. So it's something that we could be looking at and have a creative boundaries that address a lot of the issues that are being brought up. So we'll have to do that analysis, make sure that the redevelopment projects that are currently active are not included in those areas until they're complete. So.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about, how we get things done. So I'm supportive of this direction, and I heard somewhere in the presentation you talk about an ad hoc. So my interest in, I have an interest in understanding where do members of the public talk about what their interests are, because I think we had slide 4, the potential areas of investment. We've heard some of our colleagues talk about that. So I'm very supportive of the process, but again, on a task force, where does the community input get inserted into the prioritization, and at what point does it come to each of these bodies for actually some decisions? And is there a potential timeline? Because I know I know a lot of our resources are going towards the recovery, and I know staff, at least on the city side, I'm sure for the county, I think Peter could be our poster child for at capacity, the number of things we're asking of staff. How does this fit in with all the other things that we're expecting of staff from both the county and the city?
So I'll talk to the public input process. One idea is the first step is to get direction from this body to evaluate it. So if we do run some numbers to see what the potential is, some potential boundaries based on the input we're receiving. Again, study sessions are probably a format that we could use, both the City Council and the Board of Supervisors, to accept feedback. In terms of an ad hoc, I think that's something that City Manager McGlynn brought up as a potential that could be a vehicle. So absolutely, we do want to get feedback. We need to flesh this out, but until we have some numbers and some potential boundaries to talk about, we felt that it would be better to bring something forward to react to and get input from that. Did I answer your other question? I'm sorry, the second part of your question.
Well, it's kind of like a timeline. So where would this fit?
Timeline.
How soon would this actually start moving towards realization in those community conversations?
Yeah, so I think the sooner we can get something in place, if this is the direction we want to go, and it does look like it's something viable, the better before development happens, so you can capture that tax increment and put it back into things that people just brought up. It will probably take a few months to run the analysis piece. So my guess is we'd probably be getting public input over the next month or two, and we'll figure out what those forums look like. It'd be best to do them as a joint meeting so we can get feedback from both if we're going to work together on this.
Any other questions from the board? No other, or comments? No. Okay, great.
Ms. Combs.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this item forward, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this develops and pans out, particularly, as my colleague said, with public input. I have a really basic question, if I may. We have a number of homes that were being taxed at one level in the Fountain Grove area that are now land, as hard as that is to say. So they wouldn't be taxed at the same level they were being taxed at. Then we are hoping we will have significant rebuild. Will those be increment, or will those be at the level they were prior to the rebuild? And I'm sorry to ask such a basic question. It just seemed like we should take that into account.
Yeah, my understanding is it depends on when. Yeah, so I think the question being when we rebuild and the increase in property tax revenue
Rebounds from where it is today.
Yeah, my understanding is it would take place based on when when the district was put in place. But again, it depends on where that boundary is drawn in terms of what it's encompassing. So that's something we'll have to look at. I think that's a good feedback that we'll take that into account as we look through what
it may
the
be
values are.
worth looking at whether or not we can say it was the value, the tax base value at the time prior to the fire.
Right.
And we may want to have that conversation, because we also want those resources to be able to go into the infrastructure for those areas. Although, as you know, I'm strongly interested in having funding for affordable housing. So I think we have a little delicate balance to do there. I look forward to hearing how that develops.
Other questions from the council? Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just responding a little bit to the comments that the Vice Mayor and the Supervisor made about the dollars not being free, essentially. I agree. One of the things that I'd be interested in looking at is when we talk about things like the implementation of the Climate Action Plan or about the construction of secondary units, there's a first cost barrier that once people get over it and are actually able to implement it, it pays for itself. And so one of the things I'd be interested in looking at that would leverage these dollars in the forefront, as an example, just spitballing, eliminating the fees for creation of a secondary unit that then is paid back incrementally, but using the pot of money to get over that first cost barrier and allow people to realize the savings as they pay it off. I'd be interested in seeing that.
Okay. Yeah, great. I think that's it.
I just wanted to make a comment here. You know, since the fires, there's been a lot of talk about how the fires have created an opportunity to build transit-oriented development in Santa Rosa, or senior housing, or affordable housing, higher density housing. All of those opportunities existed before the fires started. Right. And all those opportunities exist where they should exist, and that's in the downtown, in the core of the city, in our transit corridors along the Smart Line, and these are the kind of projects that can benefit everyone in the county by creating that affordable housing, that transit-oriented development, the things that this city is talking about. So I think this is a great tool to be looking at. I will support direction to the staff to pursue this. I don't see any heads going east to west on the council. I think the council supports that direction. I hope the board will too.
Yeah, and I will also support, and I'm hoping to get also a word from the three of you in terms of supporting staff to explore this with the city staff. I would like to name an ad hoc to work on this, but I don't. I'm not prepared to do that tonight. I'm going to let you guys talk to me and see who's interested to be on that. Yes, Supervisor Gorin.
Well, I would appreciate the conversation of moving this forward, but I think Supervisor Hopkins, Supervisor Gore, myself, and we all represent much more than the city boundaries. And so
Yes.
we have a basic conversation that we need to have. What would an EIFD accomplish, and how would the rural counties benefit from this and other communities? Do we want to just limit it to the city? So the complexity of who we represent is a little bit more challenging.
Right. And I do think that the city staff is farther along than the county staff on this, but I think we can at least give direction tonight for the county staff to begin to speak to the city staff in more depth, because we haven't heard a lot of this yet. And then I'll appoint an ad hoc after I talk to all of you offline. So, yeah.
And Supervisor Gorin, I just want to reiterate that I wouldn't support an EIFD that took the county's increment into
That's right.
account unless it benefited
Everybody.
the county.
Yeah.
So I actually think that we can do that with some of the knowledge that I've gained in looking at this over time. And I understand that that needs to be communicated to everybody here and to everybody in the community as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I just want to add that we all represent on the board portions of the city incorporated and unincorporated. I represent the least amount of unincorporated, but nevertheless, we all have interests in terms of representing the constituency, and Supervisor Rabbit is smiling because he does not represent Santa Rosa.
I am the only one of the
You are
12
the
here
only one
that
that's
does not
not-
represent
Yes.
a portion of Santa Rosa, but I do represent the second largest city in the county.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate very much the mayor's comments, and I think that everything is worth exploring. I think
Yep.
that's definitely the case. And then finding out, making sure that there's no unforeseen consequences to that at a time when, as a county and a city, we're
recovering.
struggling, quite
Yeah.
frankly. So thank you.
Yeah, okay, great. Are we ready to move on to the last item then?
Yeah,
Yes.
the last item is
Yes.
the homeless system of care redesign.
Yes.
And we have city and county staff will be talking about this one.
And just a little background for the public that's here tonight. This is staff from Housing and Community Services, as well as Sonoma County Community Development Commission and the consulting firm Home Base, the Center for Common Concerns. And they're going to review the recommendations for redesigning the homeless system of care. Or as we often know it or talk about it, the homeless continuum of care. These presentations have already been offered to both the county and the city. It was offered to the Board of Supervisors on August 22nd, and it was offered also to the City Council on September 26th. So we have seen the recommendations before, but we haven't had a chance to sit down as two bodies and to be able to dialogue about this and talk about how we're going to move it forward. And I think the public will find it very interesting in terms of how we provide care now and how we hope to provide better care in the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Margaret Van Vliet, who is the director of the Sonoma County Community Development Commission.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mayor and council members and supervisors. Glad to be here, and as the chair has said, we did do these policy briefings in August and September, so we want to be very brief and just remind you of a few of the key high points. I'll kick it off and then turn it over to my colleagues. We started looking at this redesign in the summer for a few key reasons. One was that there was some confusion and sort of differences of approach in adopting and implementing what we call housing first as part of the response to homelessness. We also were finding that there was a lot of confusion about metrics and what benchmarks we ought to be using to gauge our process, our progress in trying to end homelessness. Our providers, our nonprofit partners, have experienced way too many masters. We've made their job very difficult, and so that was a key factor. And we were constantly struggling and talking with you all as elected officials about budgets, and there was never enough money to really do what we all wanted to do with homelessness. So for all of those reasons, we engaged with the City of Santa Rosa, the two jurisdictions, and the City of Petaluma as well, a conversation with a national consulting firm known as Home Base. Patrick Wigmore is here, and he'll provide a few comments and remind you of a few slides. And so we went through this process, and we're just about to talk about implementing some recommendations prior to the fires. So tonight we want to remind you of where we were and really get your nod of approval to continue to proceed towards implementing and bringing back more specific recommendations for redesigning the homeless system of care. So with that, let me see if Kelly wants to add anything, and then we can give it to the consultant from out of town.
Good afternoon. I'm Kelly Kuykendall. I work for the city's Housing and Community Services Department, and I'm the Homeless Services Manager. So myself, Dave Gwine, and I work very closely with Margaret's team on homelessness and a number of other issues surrounding affordable housing. I've worked closely with Margaret and her team on the redesign, and I'm also the city's representative on the Sonoma County Continuum of Care Board. Look forward to, subject to your direction this evening, to continue to work with Margaret and the CDC staff on the redesign process. And just want to note that all the work that's being done around the redesign ties into the city's efforts on homelessness and specifically its Housing First strategy. With that, I'll hand it over to Patrick.
Thank you, Kelly and Margaret. Before we get started, for most of my career when we've done this work, I want to give a little bit of background for some of the key terms. I know I've given presentations to the Board of Supervisors and to City Council, but the key thing to remember is that homeless systems need to operate as a system. And when we came in to do this work, and I've worked in numerous other communities across the country, too many to count, it's oftentimes very helpful for me to just get a very good lay of the land to see where the community's at, see how it's operating. And I usually talk communities back. A lot of communities want to think that their community is different, that the population is different. And in many ways, people can have unique situations, but the plight of homelessness is often very similar across communities. I will say when I came to Sonoma that one thing off the bat that was very different was just the amount of groups that were involved in ending homelessness in the community. And I can confidently say in the 10 plus years I've worked for the federal government primarily as a consultant, I've never seen this amount of activity centered around the issue of homelessness. And part of it shows the concern and care that the people for the city, or for the county of Sonoma and the city of Santa Rosa have for this issue, and that's certainly to be applauded. But part of it also, and we detail in the report, which is available, that in many ways this is a outgrow. I use in the report an example of a house that's had multiple additions put on. And each of these bubbles is really an addition to the house that we probably started building 15, 20 years ago when street homelessness first started to appear here in this community and in communities across the country. And I think one of the key recommendations for the redesign, we'll get into those in the latter slides, but is to really try to simplify this process. I mean, I think we're here today with City of Santa Rosa and Sonoma County to make sure we've increased coordination on various topics. And a lot of these bubbles, there are people in here, constituency groups that unfortunately cannot be here all in one room. And so it's important to remember when you're designing a homeless system that you really have to have broad coordination, both present and then sometimes removed for the system to work. And so if you felt a level of frustration or felt that the system here does not work in the right way, it's probably reflective from just how many people are involved in the process. Quickly, kind of what an ideal structure would look like, and these are reflections from other Bay Area communities and systems of care that would exist. So the first thing you have to remember is that this is one system of care. So it is Sonoma County. So I mean, we certainly have joint representation here, but also the city of Petaluma, and then other municipalities that might not be as involved, be it because of smaller or it's not an issue, really need to come together and see that this is their issue to end. And I think one of the main struggles we've had is you have multiple funding streams. So you have the city of Santa Rosa, Sonoma County, and then to a lesser extent some of the city of Petaluma and some of the smaller communities. pooling their funding together and creating their own systems of care across the county. And so you also have that reflective in the staff that are presenting here today, and in just the level of coordination that's required in order to really just make decisions. And that's the primary thing that we looked at in the report, was just how are decisions made for ending homelessness? Because it's an unfortunate, and this comes from the federal government, there are not enough funds available to house everyone who's going to experience homelessness. And so the key, and that's unfortunate, and there are ways we can maximize them, but the key is going to be to prioritize the resources that we do have for those the most in need. And in order to prioritize those, the key thing you really need to have is a structural body, I call them a primary decision-making group in the report, that has the authority to really make those tough decisions. Decide where we're going to prioritize resources, how we're going to do it in a fair and equitable way, how we're going to do it in a housing first mentality that encourages the dignity of the people that we're trying to help, but also does it in a way that's fair and equitable across the county. Integrated within this are key working groups that need to exist. So we heard a little bit prior about the tax implementation districts, and conversations like that need to occur within the homeless field as well too, especially with the fires and the additional disaster recovery funds that are coming in. One of the key recommendations is to create a pipeline committee, a committee that will help you organize all of the different individuals who have the knowledge and expertise for how to develop new units to try to increase the supply that we have in the community, but do so in a much more coordinated way across the county. There's other recommendations in the report for very streamlined committees that can exist. I mean, it's unfortunate to try to have more committees. I mean, obviously the hope would be we would sunset some of the other ones that are in the chart, but trying to create committees that really bring together the best and the brightest and have a very clear direction from a decision-making group so that they're not bogged down in bigger picture ideas that they don't really have a say in, but can really focus on a key deliverable and bring it back to the group for approval. Go through quickly some of the recommendations that we proposed. So the first is a collective impact decision-making group in Sonoma County that owns the issue of homelessness for the county. And I think when you have such a split of where the issue of homelessness lives in the county, there's not a clear owner. And lacking that clear owner, it's easy to point fingers at the city or the county or just the issue itself. And in communities that have ended homelessness or have come a very long way and close to it, the ownership is the key part. So they really have a vision and an idea, and they might not agree fully on it, but they know that there's one group or one plan that exists that identifies all of the strategies that they're going to focus their resources on and drive collectively towards that vision. The second piece, and it goes part and parcel with the group, is to really brand the issue of ending homelessness in the community. And branding is an odd thing to kind of hear with an issue of homelessness, but communities across the country have found it as a very successful way to, for good or bad, have a name for ending homelessness in the community. So Away Home America is an example in Seattle. Away Home in Los Angeles is another example where there are ideas behind the brand. So integration of housing first, creation of new units, targeting towards certain populations, and that brand, good or bad, has the ownership of the issue throughout the community. And so it's really allowed individuals who might not necessarily be part of the system rally behind it once success starts to build. I talked a bit about some of the creation of key working groups, but these would really be dynamic groups that have clear charges from the community itself. Approval from this group of the first charge that we had was to integrate housing first in the community, and I know people from all the multiple interviews we've had certainly had a lot of trainings and various exercises for how to integrate housing first, but a lot of them still did not know if that was necessarily where the county itself, the whole system of care, wanted to go. And I think having different bodies in charge of each of the process, they didn't necessarily feel that there was complete buy-in across the county for completing a housing first mentality. And in order to do that, it really is a philosophy of helping individuals first and requires a sea change for how providers operate within the community. And if you have any doubt that this might not be the key way to go from the decision-making group, you certainly will hesitate to be able to make the kind of required changes to your project that are necessary. And then the final piece is approval. So one of the ways to be able to do that is to have this group really complete a housing first philosophy as the guiding principle for this group for where they want to go. And then the final piece is to be able to really adhere in some way, and there's various ways in the report to do this, but to make sure that providers are adhering to this. So helping the hardest to serve in the community, making sure that they're helping, taking them directly off the streets into housing, and being assessed across the county so that other providers aren't kind of cheating the system, so to speak, and so that they're helping the hardest to serve and others aren't. I think with that, Margaret, do you want to close it there?
So I would just add, I think, to the system recommendations from Patrick, we talked about some recommendations which we are beginning to implement to just align our work as city staff around deliverables in contracting, around our ways of thinking about coordinating our funding processes. So we're working at a staff level really as much as we can to just bring that alignment and for clarity for the system and for our providers. And so we're trying to move in these directions. I think what we were hoping is that we would get, again, some nods of approval, if you will, to sort of say, go back and bring some more specific recommendations around what a primary decision-making group might want to look like. We had started those conversations before the fires, and so I think we intend to pick those back up, assuming you want us to do that. And I think in this moment, a couple of you have said it tonight. It certainly resonates for me. I think everything needs to be on the table in terms of what we're willing to do. Many more people in our community in the last 30 days had the unpleasant experience of housing insecurity. And I think if that doesn't bring home the sort of the question in a very personal and tangible way for those of us who thought we'd never go there, I don't know what else would. So I do think this is a moment where, as staff, we're certainly ready to take up the charge and do whatever it takes. We're willing to sort of put everything on the table and just are eager for your feedback and direction. So thank you.
Thank you. Just one clarifying question before we get started, and if one of you could hit the lights also. So the collective impact decision-making group, is that another name for a re-engineered continuum of care board?
So they would be one and the same. So I think one of the key issues here is merging that group with the county funds and the city funds that are making decisions, funding decisions and performance-based decisions. So it would be one collective group.
And what you're recommending is that we as electeds get together to try and figure out what that group looks like?
Correct.
Working with staff to okay.
Correct.
Thank
and
you.
I would say, I mean, there is an existing operating, functioning continuum of care
Yes.
board. They obviously have been thinking and doing a lot of work around this as well. So our intent would be to do it in consultation with the providers, of course. But I do think there's a leadership question that you all will want to take up.
Great. Thank you.
Great. And I'll just add, I think we will be prepared after we have a discussion tonight to appoint a joint city-county task force that can look at this and move this forward. We're definitely in need of it. We've tried a lot of things in terms of ending homelessness and housing and housing first, and we've put a lot of money into it, but like a lot of entities around the United States, we still have a huge problem. So we got to wrap our arms around it in a way that's strategic and efficient in terms of the resources that we have. I'm going to first look to the Board of Supervisors to see if any of my colleagues have questions or comments about this. And Supervisor Gorin?
Thank you.
Mr. Chernoff, if you continue to disrupt this meeting, I'll ask that you be escorted out. Bye.
Thank you. Veteran of Mr. Chernoff, both on the city and the county. It's always fun. Thank you for the report. I appreciate that. And you can appreciate the conversation that we had, we both on the council and the board, several months ago just has been sort of blown out of the water. And how will you overlay your recommendations dealing with the calamity that we have on homelessness now, and the conversations that I've had with FEMA and HUD over the temporary emergency housing? Conversely, how will those conversations and solutions help with the recommendations that you have over the long term?
So one of the key projects I've worked on is with the city of Houston. It was the example I used for a lot of you. And one of the things that they have told me has helped more is from the disaster they had with the hurricane, is having an organized structure and really being able to use it to make on-the-spot changes for how homelessness was working in their community. And so there certainly are ways in which, especially given the long time frame for the disaster recovery, to make sure that you integrate all of the resources that you're going to be able to have for the disaster recovery into the process. But it certainly is probably going to be challenging to be able to do it at the same time while this is occurring. But we've worked in communities in the past that have had disasters, trying to create this on the spot to be able to do this. So it's not unheard of to be able to do it at the same
And
time.
how is Houston doing, given their recent disaster? Are they moving ahead?
Yeah, I mean, the system that they'd set up, which is similar to what I recommended, had really allowed them, they had the ability to handle the scale that came with the just record number of individuals experiencing homelessness.
That's encouraging. Thank you. Yeah.
Councilor, are there questions? Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm curious, you said that in Houston they were able to move forward and rather quickly. Is part of that ability to move forward the ability of that board to act quickly and for both the political bodies and the community to trust their decision making, because government can get very, very slow when we go back to our individual bodies and take months to make decisions, not because we want to, but because that's the way government functions at times. So is their ability to be, they need to be trusted and be able to be nimble, is that correct?
Yeah, the example that I used for them was fitting for you because it's not, we say Houston, but it was Harris County. And so all of the approvals for the governmental approvals that we recommend in the report, so creating a joint entity that can make decisions, had already been set up ahead of the storm. And so it certainly allowed them to operate and make decisions in the same way that they were before the storm, but just handle the scale that the storm presented.
Okay. Questions or comments also from the board? Supervisor Hopkins or Supervisor Rabbit? Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I am so grateful for all of the, I'm sure, hundreds of hours of work that went into interviewing providers, sitting down with the local elected officials, and I am wholeheartedly in support of this recommendation. I think that it couldn't come soon enough, and this is really, truly, I mean, I've said this in the past, but we actually share a homeless population that migrates along the Joe Rodoto Trail inside and outside of city limits, and so the fact that we were both trying to address this with different funding pots and different strategies just makes no sense, and so I'm really looking forward to working with the City Council, and so grateful that it feels like, hopefully I'm not, sort of stepping too far, that we're all really truly partners in this effort and coming together to address this crisis. So thank you.
I think I want to make my own personal comment as somebody who's worked a lot on some of these issues, and if at times I've been very hopeful and other times I've been discouraged. And I think the bubbles slide that you put up earlier of showing all the different bodies involved in the process, I think that's encouraging to me, because even though it may not be horribly effective, what it does mean is that Santa Rosa and Sonoma County have great passion in terms of in social justice, pride, that we do want to end homelessness, and we do realize that it really is a horrific blot upon our county as a community, and we all want to do better. So I'm encouraged by the presentation and the recommendations, and I'm hoping we will move forward tonight.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, mostly just wanted to make a comment. I am supportive overall of realignment of our services to make sure that we're being as efficient as we can be. I was reading an article earlier today about Sacramento They've got about 3,000 homeless individuals, and the mayor's actually asking for $54 million increase in their homeless services budget. So just highlighting that we're not alone in this in Santa Rosa. But I did want to bring up, I've had a number of constituents reach out to me, a general perception that right now the city and the county are having a hard time walking and chewing gum at the same time. And wanted to make sure that we're putting out there that while we do this and make sure that we're realigning, that we're also not losing sight of it as a priority and really understanding that the rain is here and we still have people living under underpasses and out in the public. And making sure that we are continuing to move forward, even if it's not in the most efficient manner, but still moving forward nonetheless and helping people.
Yeah, council member, absolutely. I think I can speak for all the folks I work with in county government. We very much intend to be able to walk and chew gum and probably build an airplane while we're at it. I mean, if we can. And we understand the urgency. And I think, without naming names, there's at least one provider who got caught in some of the back and forth who's on first conversation in the last few weeks, especially the last 10 days around, wait, what's happening as the Red Cross leaves? Who's picking up the people? Were they really disaster impacted or what? And so that really brought to mind exactly the point you're making, and I think we all take it very much to heart. So thank you.
And then my last comment is actually related to that about Red Cross leaving. There were a number of donations that came in, whether they be cots or blankets or pillows, that we still have. And those resources are still available. And maybe there's room in the conversation to talk about how those new resources can be utilized to help with this priority that we had before the fire even.
Absolutely, and I think part of what that demands is a recognition that the structure, the command structure, if you will, that we stand up in response to the emergency is not the place to do those policy things and that strategic thinking. And so we've got to do a warm handoff, and I'm very much working with my colleagues in county government to do that. And I've got Kelly on speed dial, so yeah.
Okay, great. I think I'd like to put forward two of our board members now.
A couple more questions.
Oh, you had a couple more? Oh, sorry. Okay.
We have more people
I know you
on
have
this
more
side.
people. Yeah, sorry about that. Go ahead.
Mr. Schwedhelm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A concern I have with some of the recommendations is, oh boy, more meetings, just like this slide was. And my understanding that homelessness has never been solved by a committee. We actually need to get to action. So I'm wondering, Patrick, given your experience across the nation, when we talk about that first bullet point about establishing an ad hoc group, a frustration that I share with Councilmember Sawyer is that they make this recommendation, then it goes to the bodies who, quite frankly, aren't the subject matter experts of the task force. And quite frankly, we have a city manager, too, from the city side who also is balancing resources. Do you have some models about the decision-making authority of the ad hoc in some of this group that has been practiced and shown to be successful at other parts of the country that maybe we could model ours at?
Yep. So the ad hoc, just to be clear, would be a group kind of to create the group itself. And so there's certainly different ways that I've done this in the past for reconstituting a group. And I think given the multiple parties and some of the jurisdictions that are involved, an ad hoc group was my recommendation, given that it can let all parties come together. And so we certainly have examples from other communities that have been able to use this to be able to share. Margaret worked on one with me in the past on a project a few years ago in Portland, Oregon. And so I think there are certainly other ways we could do it, but just given the number of players, that's my recommendation, just to be able to get everyone on the same page.
And I believe an active facilitator for this process would be needed. Is that something that is within the purview or the contract with Homebase, or is that another discussion that the city and county would need to decide? How are we going to get someone on board who can shepherd us through this process, again, for efficiency?
So we're out of contract dollars for this guy for the moment, but we can talk about sort of how we operationalize that next step. I also wanted to just underscore, I think you're right, the decision-making body is one piece that's important, but it's not where the sort of tactical work is going to happen. And so I think this idea of task groups and clarity of staff roles have to go part and parcel with it. And so I think the providers and the government staff are really eager to jump into those other roles under the leadership of a new decision-making body.
Because, and I guess that creation of that task force, because that's what my interest would be. You can't have everyone being part of the task force, but I think venues, again, for public participation about what's the solution to ending homelessness. Everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, many people have different ideas that may be counter to each other. So, I'm a big proponent of using evidence-based models that have been successful elsewhere. But again, getting to the point where we're actually doing things versus just talking about it. I would love to be able to, get there as quick as we can. I'm supportive of these recommendations.
Very good.
Mr. Olivers.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe when you came to present the council, I mentioned this as well, and I think you mentioned earlier that you used the word ownership as far as this body and others as well. And I talked about the need for our community taking ownership of this issue as well, because it does impact every person in our county. Everyone's impacted by homelessness in some way. So again, I encourage that as we move forward is that we work really hard to educate the community about what it is that we're doing, to give them opportunities to weigh in along the way. Because we're, in a certain sense, we're using a new language in some of these areas. For example, the Housing First model, coordinated entry, and others. So we need to make sure that our community understands that, and they understand what is our goal, what is our plan, and where do they fit it in as individuals as well, because there is something that everybody can do. And sometimes, well-intentioned, we try to do something that may not be the most productive thing that we can be doing. So again, it's providing them the tools, too, to be active participants along the way.
Any other last questions from the council?
Okay, great. Well, I want to put forward that we do appoint a joint city-county ad hoc to move forward with some of the recommendations that have been given to us. And I'm going to appoint Supervisor Hopkins and Supervisor Gorin from the county side to be on this.
And thank you to Councilmember Combs and Councilmember Schwedhelm, who've agreed to serve with me on an ad hoc to this end. And
The county, with the county.
ad hoc with the county.
With the county,
Yes.
yeah. Don't forget the with the county.
So you'll be hearing more about that soon. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. You guys are great. I think that maybe some of the members of the public would like to have these slides. Margaret, are they available on the Community Development Commission website? Okay, so if you go to the county website and then click on Community Development Commission, you can pull up these slides in case you want them as a member of the public.
Okay, we're to the portion of the workshop where we get to hear from the public. I'm going to ask a couple of things during public comment. One is that I'll call a couple of names so people will be ready. We've got a lot of speakers tonight. Also that you refrain from applause or boos or exclamations of any kind during people's presentations, just for the sake of efficiency in getting through these many cards. Finally, because we have so many speakers, I'm going to ask you to limit your comments to 1.5 minutes, and we will get through these. I know, but I trust that all of you can say what you need to say in 1.5 minutes. We're going to start with Maggie O'Brien, and she will be followed by Ann Seeley.
Yeah, you got it. So is that it? Yeah. Hi, so my name is Maggie O'Brien. I live in the West End, and I work in downtown Santa Rosa, and I bike commute. And that's been adversely affected more so than usually recently. I was actually attacked on my bicycle going under 5th Street last week in broad daylight by some people who were living in a tent. So this is extremely refreshing.
Stay close to that microphone, please.
Oh, this is extremely refreshing because I really think it is a great idea, exactly what I'm seeing here. But I guess the question for my neighbors and I is, what is the immediate plan to maintain the safety of my neighbors and basically the sanitation and the safety of the people underneath the freeways? I don't like to see them living like that any more than I like to be attacked by one or two of some people who are living under the freeway. So that's our biggest concern. Is this wonderful planning in the future is great, but what's your plan for tonight when my neighbors are up awake because they're screaming and fighting under the freeway? So that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I want to assure you that council and the board and our staffs are listening to you. We're not going to be taking questions and giving answers in this portion. It's time for the public to comment to us. So thank you. We do hear you. Ann Seeley, and she'll be followed by Dwayne DeWitt.
Hello, I'm Ann Seeley. I'm Chair of Concerned Citizens for Santa Rosa, board member of Conservation Action, and a very, very, very unofficial spokesperson for the Southeast Greenway campaign. I understand you county board members and the city council will be considering every parcel of land in Sonoma County for housing development in the future. There is one jewel of a piece of property that I hope you will take off the list, and that is the Southeast Greenway project area. It has been mentioned in a somewhat cavalier fashion as, oh, that's open land. It's not really. It's going to be a great amenity for a large number of people in this city. So I hope that that's off the list. Thank you.
Thank you. Dwayne DeWitt.
Over here, sir. I'll come over there.
He'll be followed by Maya Kosla.
Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland, now in Santa Rosa. I was given this sign. Thank you so much. I brought this hat. It's a gift for you that you all should be united and allied to make a better community. And I believe after listening to this tonight, you can do that. I take the hat off to you. What I'd like to say is I think it's really important that you look over to Roseland as that jewel in the rough and that you polish it up, because you've got an old 264-acre redevelopment project area that just kind of languished for a long time. It now has a homeless encampment that's been there for 2 years in a peaceful way and is working. But they shouldn't be intense. We could get them into the large warehouses that are there. We could find ways to protect people from the weather this winter and treat them as refugees from the fire, just like everybody else is. So also, I have a letter from Mike Thompson back when he was in the state senate 20 years ago. And the mayor at that time was Sharon Wright. And they were supportive of working to redevelop Roseland and the brownfields. And brownfields is a federal program that could help you folks in the future. So as we go forward, please look to the regular people in the community, the people who've been homeless and the people who've advocated to make things better, and let them be part of your decision-making process. If you plan for us, let us be a part of it. Don't plan without us.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Maya?
Thank you very much for all your presentations. I'm very impressed. I have 2 questions only, and maybe they're comments. One is to do with the rebuilding plan, and one is to a little more of a nitty-gritty question, basics of erosion after clearance. So the first question, comment would be, with the current proposals for redevelopment, the pace is important, and I understand the need to go as fast as possible. I'm wondering if they're considering the juxtaposition of the 1964 Hanley fire footprint with the 2017 Tubbs fire footprint, both of which are really similar. And the 1964 fire, of course, destroyed far fewer structures. Is that an indication of what the planning should be and where the planning should look in the future, given the fact that some areas have a history of wildfire? And is that part of your planning process? I hope it is the comment. And the second question would be, as you're, I'm very impressed by the slides, or excuse me, the footage of the clearing, and it seems highly organized with, I know, friends in the EPA who have been called in to help with the clearing, and I'm highly impressed. It's amazing, and thank you very much. And what I want to ask is, or comment on, is once that clearing is done, the soil is mobilized, and I'm wondering if there's
I need you
to
wrap this up pretty quickly. Your time is done.
Sorry.
So please
so
just
if there's
wrap up.
any kind of replanting plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lloyd Iverson, followed by Mara Ventura.
Hi, I'm Lloyd Iverson, and I've taken this need for homes it personally because people I know were killed in this fire, and friends, and I've taken families into my home and people into my home. But I want to talk about the biggest impediment to all this is PRMD, Permit Resource Management Department in Sonoma County. I went today to renew my permit that lapsed during this, and it took me from 8:23 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. to renew my permit that I already had. And now they want me to pay a whole nother permit for something they pulled out of it. So you're talking about waiving fees for extra homes. In the meantime, people who are already doing the right thing. I'm a contractor. Okay, I have 7 licenses. I know how to do this. I know how to fix my house so we can all live there in houses we already own. But if you own a mobile home, you're a second-class citizen in Sonoma County. You're automatically discriminated against when you go into PRMD, and they send you over to the assessor's office, and if their records don't agree with PRMD's records, you're out of luck. And the records at the assessor's office are disgraceful, and the records at PRMD are disgraceful. Papers are missing, files are mixed up, you get told different information every time you go in. So how are we going to ever solve this housing issue if we have such a dysfunctional building department down there? It's the people are doing the best they can, but the system is broken. It's a broken system.
Thank you, Mr. Everson. Maura Ventura, followed by James Arrieta.
Good evening. Whoa, I felt short before. Hi, good evening, Council and Board of Supervisors. My name is Mara Ventura. I'm the lead organizer with North Bay Jobs with Justice. Oh, I don't know if I can get closer to this. Okay.
You might have to hold that, Mara.
I'm just going to Mariah Carey this, all right? Across race, income, immigration status, and geography, the fires revealed inequalities and injustices that have been here long before the fires ravaged Santa Rosa in this county of Sonoma, excuse me. The workers who will be doing much of this recovery and rebuilding will be low and moderate income communities with the least resources, many of which will be immigrant and or undocumented, and they must be at the center of any strategy that we have for rebuilding. We will be worse off as a community if we only have a recovery strategy for the middle to upper class families. And we will lose our most vulnerable if they're subjected to poverty wages or unsafe working conditions before the rebuild even finishes. At North Bay Jobs with Justice, we are a coalition of 17 labor unions and community organizations, and we are calling on you all to ensure that the structural issues of inequality, climate crisis, racial and environmental justice are central to the recovery and rebuilding process. We need to develop a cleanup and rebuilding policies that include workers' voices, labor, faith, environmental, and community organizations for immediate and long-term plans that are equitable, just, and sustainable. We need to ensure the recovery and rebuilding process are transparent, inclusive, and create economic opportunity for low and moderate income communities. And we want to focus on good jobs, housing, and sustainable energy and healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. James Arrieta, followed by Robert Young.
Hi, so I'm James Arrieta. I have a degree in finance and currently work with the former chair of the President's Economic Board in Texas. And I'm here to talk about the EFIB thing. I don't think you guys are really taking this seriously with this thing. I don't think people here really understand what this is. And what it is that you guys here are paying taxes. And these guys are going to take your tax revenue or borrow against the future tax revenue, one of the two, and they're going to give it to someone like a developer, say Gallagher in Santa Rosa here. And they're going to use that to develop that piece of property, for example, the old hospital, community hospital. And then that's going to have a lower cost basis for him, and he's going to make more money. Now that they're going to use the future tax revenue from that development to pay for that borrowing and or the revenue that they used to begin with. Now, as most of you know, the current state of infrastructure is really bad. It's, my street's Ramadi, and I'm paying $8,300 a year in property taxes. So, that's not very good, and I don't think you guys really fully comprehend what you're doing or what you're signing up for. The presentation that was provided was utter trash. I don't know what to say about it. It didn't explain anything, and it's really unfortunate, and I'm rather disgruntled by that. But going further, I don't think you guys have a full concept of what's going on. I understand these things were planned ahead of time, but half the community just burned down. You guys have a hole in your budget the size of China, but you guys are talking about homelessness, which has been a problem for 30 years and isn't
You have
going
to wrap this up, Mr. Arrieta.
It's not going anywhere anytime soon, and you're talking about borrowing money.
Okay, thank you.
For a developer that you guys are tied
your
to.
Your time's up. Thank you. Robert Young, please, folks, be kind to the people behind you and respect your time limits. Robert Young. Jorge, help me out, Mr. Rebagliati. Just like it's spelled. Sorry, and you'll be followed by Kevin McDermott Swanson.
Yeah, can you hear me? As the price tag from the unprecedented super firestorms in Sonoma County grows to billions of dollars, over $3 billion so far, we're struggling to find the funding for this unprecedented amount of money and pondering hard how that money is going to be spent in order to become a stronger, more resilient, healthier, and more sustainable community. For several years, Sonoma County has been a climate change aware county, and like last year approved the intentional document Climate Change Action 2020 plan. Nevertheless, like a majority of Americans, we have been acting with the illusion that climate change catastrophes were not going to happen to us, or at least not in the near future. The Tusk Fire and the other catastrophic fires in October 2017 have proven us wrong. The climate change-related conditions in the environment turned a probable seasonal event into something close to doomsday. We ignored its likelihood, and we didn't prepare enough. If we want to succeed in transforming effectively Sonoma County, we must elevate climate change action to be the core organizing principle of the new Sonoma County. Not doing that would be unconscionable. The transformation to become a climate change-ready county has two essential components. Climate restoration towards a more sustainable state of climate by becoming a carbon-negative economy as fast as it is physically possible, and adaptation to climate change to minimize the damage from future climate crisis-related events that will come more often than in the past. The Sonoma County Board of Supervisors and the City Council of Sonoma County have the power to lead that transformation by using its executive powers to commit our county to be such a climate change-ready county. The commitment will be sealed with official, public, and detailed enough climate change major disaster declarations.
Thank you very much. Kevin McDermott Swanson. He'll be followed by Jay Schaefer.
Today I listened to these two bodies get together, and they offered 3 equivocating responses, 4 placating statements, 2 deflections of responsibility, and 4 calls for the city to rise up from the action.
Stand closer to that microphone, please.
And 4 calls for this city to rise up stronger from the ashes of this fire than before. Amongst all that, I got 12 counts for expediency and 3 calls for responsibility. I understand not wanting the redevelopment of the houses destroyed in this fire to be more dense for various reasons, and that there are other places. But my concern is, how are these 2 bodies going to prevent that redevelopment from being less dense? What are you going to do as our representatives to prevent those of us who have money from buying up multiple lots and developing larger homes on top of neighborhoods that were once primarily residents of single families who desperately need low-income housing? We have a crisis in this county. We've had it for a while. And this could get much worse. And we need you to protect us. That's why we elected you.
Thank you. Jay Schaefer, followed by Judith Sam. I am. Sorry. Is Jay Schaefer?
Yes,
Oh, please.
I'm Jay Schaefer. Thank you, and I'm here to propose that...
Please, closer to the mic.
Thank you. I am here to propose that Sonoma County took advantage of California's Shelter Crisis Act that allows us to basically do whatever we want in terms of providing affordable housing in an emergency in order to essentially put a moratorium on all codes and zoning laws that have nothing to do with constitutional welfare clauses It sounds like it might be complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward. There are a few codes that actually are created by the industry, housing industry, insurance industry, and others in order to sell more product. If we can just put a moratorium on those and enact the Shelter Crisis Act, we could actually provide a lot of good housing very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Judith I am. She'll be followed by Miguel Elliott.
I'd like to propose that the phrase disaster capitalism be very attentively watched. And as we were preceded by someone who mentioned that the public monies were not properly explained, and this should be explained because big monies are shifting. And as we know, following the money is critical. This is a time for total shift in the materials we use, the systems we use regarding energy, water, food, and everything else, the structures themselves in terms of the size, the shape of them, and the communities that they form. Because economically, socially, and every other way, that's what makes this county, this city, and every part of what we live in healthy or not. So this is a huge opportunity. And I suggest that all of us who are citizens and live here be critical in the decision-making process, and you have as many meetings as possible and give us more than 90 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. Miguel Elliott, followed by Debbie McKay. Sure.
My name is Miguel Elliott. I have a service called Living Earth Structures based out of Sonoma County. And I specialize in building earthen structures, very durable, fire resilient, ecologically sound structures. And I've done a lot of traveling around the world, and I've seen villages being built where there's nobody that's without a home. Everybody has a home because they use the materials that are readily available. And I know that there are not, a lot of these building practices are not allowed in current building code. And I would like to request that if there's an effort to try to consider more creative solutions to housing right now, if we could, if the board could work with us to get some more testing done, to test some alternative building practices so that we could actually update some of the code requirements to make it easier for us to build small structures on the ground, not necessarily not on trailers, but permanent foundations, and so to consider these alternatives into the building code and to really work towards creating alternative solutions, specializing in natural building that are non-flammable and very affordable to build.
Thank you. Please observe the waving hands rather than clapping so we can keep this going. Debbie McKay, followed by Gregory Fearon.
Hi, I want to say how much I appreciate you coming together, and I know how difficult it must have been to do that with what you've just been through, and it tells me that this really is a priority to you, that you would devote this much time while you're in the middle of a crisis. I hope you will continue to meet jointly periodically, and I have 3 suggestions on things you might look at those future meetings. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people in this community are not going to be able to rebuild, and they may not even know that yet. So I would like you to brainstorm on what are you going to do with the property where people don't rebuild. I don't have the answer to that. I'm sure you don't either, but I think it's going to be an issue for this community, and I hope you can provide leadership on that. The other thing is we don't have enough people to build the construction that we need. So I hope you would partner with the North Coast Builders Exchange and possibly the Sonoma County Office of Education, which has the Regional Occupation Program, to see if there is something we can do in our own community to get the skills we need, provide the jobs we need, so we have people out of our own community that can help with the rebuilding process. And then finally, I would urge you to, especially with the county was doing an outreach program on solar power when this all hit, and they were holding community meetings in the library. I would hope that you would continue that process, and maybe in particular for people who are rebuilding, look at that as an opportunity. It's much cheaper to do solar when it's part of a construction than a retrofit.
Thank you. Gregory Furon, followed by Mike Johnson.
I'll be as quick as I can. Please keep your ears and your minds open to every suggestion that's offered to you, especially from the community. You're going to get a lot of ideas from other places, but this community is going to have to solve this problem, and we're here to give you every bit of advice we can and to work hard on projects that we believe might help house people. It's the community that will solve this problem, and we ask you to help us do that. Margaret used the reference earlier about inventing the plane while you fly it. And a lot of us have used that when we felt we needed to take huge risks and we needed to be able to buy into the dream that we were going to get everybody there. This is one of those opportunities where you need to make sure that you're taking risks with us, that you're thinking as hard and as long as you can about what you can do to help us do that, and that you're not closing ideas off. None of us want people under the 6th Street Bridge. None of us want people burn out of their houses, frustrated, not getting back in. But we all need to work together to be able to get each of our needs met. For a while, this plane that we're building isn't going to look like anything we've ever had. But it's going to get us there. And we have, hopefully, the willpower to get all of us to the other side. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Johnson, followed by Maddie Hirschfield. Is Mike still here? Maddie Hirschfield. She'll be followed by Marty Bennett.
Oh, that's a long walk. Supervisor Zane, Mayor Corsi, supervisors, council members, thank you so much for providing this opportunity and for coming together, and also for your leadership and ability and visibleness through this crisis. It's been noted and appreciated. There's so much going on with regard to, first of all, Maddie Hirschfield, North Bay Labor Council. So much going on with regard to rebuilding, and most of us want to do the right thing. We, the North Bay Labor Council, are concerned, as I know you are as well, about this work being done by licensed contractors. In addition, all workers performing cleanup must be paid the state prevailing wage for construction, including both hourly wage and benefits. In the aftermath to Katrina, then President Bush suspended Davis-Bacon Act in order to get construction happening faster. I know you don't have control over what this president does. I don't know that anybody does. That said, we need to be vigilant in making sure that locally we adhere to prevailing wage laws. You can work with the state to make that happen. And yes, we want to build fast, but we want to do it smart and fair. Second, we strongly believe there should be a local hiring preference. We've all heard about people choosing to leave rather than stay and rebuild both their homes and their lives. Local hire is always a good idea, but if ever there was a compelling reason for local hire, this is it. I've heard up to 8,000 people could be leaving our county as a result of the fires. Recently, Paul Gullickson wrote a very compelling piece about this issue in the Press Democrat. He said to those, I'm almost done, he said to those contemplating leaving that they need to hear from us, this community needs you back. Well, what says
Maddie,
we need and value
please.
You like a good paying prevailing wage job? We owe them that.
Thank you, Maddie.
It's the least that we can do.
Thank you. Marty Bennett, followed by Sonny Galbraith.
Good evening. Marty Bennett, North Bay Jobs with Justice. Jobs with Justice believes that the new jobs created by the recovery and rebuilding must be good jobs, and we can concur with the North Bay Labor Council that workers engaged in the cleanup and rebuilding should receive the prevailing wage for construction, and 70% of these workers should be local. Furthermore, both the Labor Council and North Bay Jobs with Justice believe that private contractors participating in the cleaning and rebuilding must provide their employees with the proper health and safety protective gear, and that contractors must require and pay for all workers to complete a 40-hour health and safety and hazardous materials training. In addition, private contractors and subcontractors participating in the cleanup and new construction must be licensed by the state of California. The city and the county should create a comprehensive list of private licensed contractors readily available to the public. Finally, we are particularly concerned that private contractors hire workers as employees and not as independent contractors and use certified payroll records to verify this practice. City University of New York researchers have documented in their 2013 report, Day Labor Worker Centers and Disaster Relief in the Aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, that there was widespread exploitation of day laborers in violation of federal and state law by private contractors during the cleanup and rebuilding after the 2012 hurricane. This included wage theft, unsafe working conditions, and a lack of training and protective care.
Marty,
In sum,
you need to
the
wrap
county
it up,
and the
please.
city and federal and state agencies providing oversight should ensure that such violation of labor rights
Thank you,
and
Mr.
immigrant
Bennett.
rights does not occur here.
Thank you. Sonny Galbraith, followed by Pauline Allen.
Sunny Galbraith, 350 Sonoma. I would like to start by acknowledging the heartbreak and hardship of so many in our community who lost homes and businesses in the fire, and extend our deepest sympathies and commitments to help with the recovery. We're here tonight with community groups that have come together to discuss how we can support an equitable and just cleanup and rebuild process that will result in an environmentally and economically sustainable and resilient future. Could the people who've come to support this please raise your hand? We recognize that those experiencing the trauma of losing their homes or businesses are the primary stakeholders in all decisions related to the challenging recovery and rebuilding process, and we want to emphasize that we are not trying to tell anybody how to rebuild their homes. Rather, we are operating on the principles that any programs established are opt-in, incentive-based, and affordable. For both the rebuild and new developments moving forward, we advocate using materials and methods that reflect best practices in sustainable design, materials, and systems in order to achieve reduced greenhouse gas emissions, greater resilience to future climate impacts, and lower electricity bills for homeowners. Specifically, we would like to see it easier and more affordable to build with all-electric homes and businesses powered by solar. We are working together with government and business entities to bring down the costs, streamline the permitting process, and make it easier to access existing incentives so that homes and business owners who opt to rebuild this way can do so affordably and expediently. We are also united with labor advocacy groups that you just heard from in making sure that the cleanup and rebuild efforts are equitable, just, and result in a stronger local economy. We understand and support the need to expedite the building process under these conditions, but we caution the council and board against moving so quickly that environmental and labor groups
Thank you, Ms. Galbraith.
are cast, that environmental
You need to
and
wrap
labor
up.
goals
Thank you. Pauline
we value
Allen,
as a community are cast aside. Thank you.
please, folks, this is, you know, if I let one person go, do I have to let everybody go? Yes. So I'm not going to let anybody go over the limit. I'm sorry. Your name
Pauline
is?
Allen.
Hi, Pauline. And you'll be followed by Barbara Moulton.
Yeah, I'll be brief because I'm with Sunny and all the other folks wearing green shirts. So I agree with what she said, and to add on to that, I'd like to provide one example of something that could be done. There's a group called Healthy Buildings Incorporated in Napa, and they make affordable prefab homes, and they have the option of building zero net energy homes. And also, in addition to this option, they, because they build their walls in a workshop off, like instead of building on site, they have the opportunity to hire folks with less higher skilled carpenters. That means we can employ more folks, and we can also, they'd be happy to help set up a wall workshop in Sonoma County, in addition to their current one in Napa, or have others do a similar thing, which will then help, help have the option of green rebuilding be accessible and affordable for folks, and have laborers to do this, which is all we agree what is very important. And the benefits to homeowners in the long run are countless with green design. So I ask you, elected officials, and I thank you for what you've already been doing, but to encourage you to make it easier by, limiting permits that are unnecessary, and just do everything you can to help people choose the green option. It was said earlier that initial startup cost is sometimes the barrier. Help us work together to eliminate that so that people can choose.
Thank you. Barbara Moulton, followed by Mark Krug.
Thank you all for your service, especially in this time. I'll just finish up what Sunny was saying. It's our hope that by working through this process in a way that upholds environmental, labor, and equity standards, our county can be a model for how communities can best work together to address a major climate-related disaster, and that will emerge stronger than before. Rebuild green. Love is stronger than the smoke. Rebuild with love, and let's do it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Mark Krug, followed by Jenny Close.
Good evening, council members and board members. Mark Krug with Burbank Housing. I want to talk in favor of financing districts, which you talked about earlier. Before I do that, I want to just take a quick second to thank you for this joint meeting, the series of joint meetings this year. I've been here 28 years, and I'm pretty confident the board and city governing boards have not met in a joint meeting during that time, and maybe ever before that. So thank you. You deserve credit for that. Regarding financing districts, as they're not easy, they're not simple. They come with consequences, as Supervisor Hopkins and others have pointed out, but it's an important tool in your toolbox. And so Burbank is encouraging you to pursue the creation of financing districts. Most importantly, it's an opportunity, should you establish some financing districts, to regain the property tax that was once going to affordable housing through redevelopment. We've lost that some 5 or 6 years ago. It's an opportunity to regain that. So I would want to ask you to consider that. If there's anything that Burbank can do to help with that narrow question of financial districts, let us know. If there's anything we can do at Burbank for the broader redevelopment, the rebuilding effort, do let us know. We appreciate it. And our mission is rooted here in Sonoma County, and we want to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny Close, followed by June Brashears.
Hi, I'm here tonight representing Sonoma County Rises. And first I want to start off by acknowledging all of your hard work during this extraordinary time, and particularly acknowledging that of Supervisor Gorin, who's been doing this really challenging work after losing her home. I also want to thank you for doing everything you can to address the needs of those directly affected by this disaster and expedite the rebuilding efforts. Sonoma County Rises came together as a group to talk about ways to rebuild and recover better together, and specifically to talk about how we can do so through a community-driven vision that has equity at the center, and looks at not only rebuilding what we've lost specifically in these disasters, but addressing the problems that existed the Saturday before the fires, what we're calling the Saturday problems. So to collect this community input that we are trying to offer to you to help you with your daunting task, we've created a robust online tool where you can provide community input right now, and that input will be crunched by a university partner, and we're also starting to talk to design building professionals and university professors who deal with community strategic planning, so that we can provide an independently developed community strategic plan to help you with your job. Again, thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you. June Brashears, followed by Phyllis Haig.
I want to appreciate all the folks that have spoken and talked about the inequities in our community that we've been dealing with for a long time. I want to appreciate the folks that have already spoke to the inequities that we've been dealing with in our community, and the folks that have talked about the need for hard standards for our labor community and jobs with justice. And the folks that have talked about rebuilding green and meeting those measures as we go forward. The ways of the past clearly haven't served our whole community, haven't provided for everybody, and haven't protected us, and haven't protected our basic safety. So going forward, we want to be sure we're moving forward in a way that's appropriate for this time we're living in. We've been hit really hard, and we need to go forward with an awareness that we're living in a time of climate crisis, and we need to be meeting people's basic needs, and there's not room for profiteering in this. And we've got a lot of expertise here to help us going forward. And I think a lot of us grew up with, some of us, with the story of the Three Little Pigs. And there's a lot of folks talking about building with sticks and hay, and well, even bricks in Earthquake California isn't good, but we've got a lot of expertise of what we want. And we want to make sure that everything we're talking about facilitating with our public funds and public resources and easing the way in permits, that those align only for equity, affordable housing, rebuilding green, what we want to promote. And we're not subsidizing the building of just whatever. that we're subsidizing and we're giving our support where we mainly need it because we don't have the resources for folks to profiteer at this. So that's my main comments, I think.
Thank you. Phyllis Haig, followed by Shelley Browning.
I'm Phyllis Haig. Am I close enough? Okay. I want to create a new bracelet that says WWPD, what would Portland do? Because Portland has a more progressive city planning process, right? And one of the ideas that they have is these turbines inside of the water delivery pipes that actually create electricity. I mean, we could be doing that kind of stuff as well as solar and wind and you know, like jazzing it up around here because we're kind of provincial in a way in our history. I've had a lot of experience with PRMD lately, and I've never seen a person leave there happy. Not one person. And last time I was in the lobby, I actually said that to all the guys that were sitting there waiting for their turn. I said, is anybody happy in here? And they were like, no, we're not happy. You know, there was one guy that was trying to get an apple press building permit, and he'd been in there for 2.5 years, he said. I talked to another developer behind me, and he said that these houses that are going to be rebuilt, the building fees will be $75,000 to $100,000 per house. Where is that money going? Come on. You know, and then when I have my inspector come out and look at my red tag granny unit that's been rented for 15 years without any problems, you know, it got red tagged because it was unpermitted, and I bought the house knowing that it was unpermitted, but then I thought it got grandfathered in, so I thought I was cool, but somebody turned me in. So I have to tear it out. And it's crazy because there's never been a problem.
I need you to wrap up, please. Thank you. Shelley Browning, followed by Cox.
Thanks. Hi. I just want to wish all you well and thank you so much for all the work you've been doing. I know you guys have been frontlining it, breathing in the smoke, and thank you for that. I appreciate it. So today, the state of New Jersey held a gubernatorial race. The Democratic candidate for governor ran on a public banking platform and won. The results are in. He stated that New Jersey's billions in tax dollars should be kept in the state's own bank where it can leverage its capital to fund local infrastructure, small businesses, affordable housing, student loans, and other state needs. In California, the city of Oakland in the month of September approved a feasibility study for a public bank of Oakland. In July, the city of Los Angeles, President of the council, Herb Wesson, put forth a motion to establish a public bank of Los Angeles. 7 council members have signed on to it, and they're underway in their research for a public bank of Los Angeles. So it's not just a state idea, it's a city. For Santa Rosa, short of financial relief efforts from the state or federal government to rebuild, this region will be forced to resort to the 5 typical means of funding: increase taxes, cut the budget, raid future budgets that have been previously set aside, sell public assets, and issue bonds. There is a 6th option. It is a public bank of Santa Rosa. Santa Rosa is a charter city, which means under Article 6, Section 5 of the California Constitution, ordinances of charter cities supersede state law with respect to municipal affairs. This means that charter cities may provide credit and depository services to their residents, much like they can provide water, electricity, and other utilities.
Thank you. Is this Courtney Cox? Is Courtney here? Deborah, followed by Sonia Tefashian. Deborah? Sonia? She'll be followed by, sorry.
Thank you for this forum.
Wyan Truong. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you for this forum, everybody that's here. And I might be the one person that left the PRMD happy because it's really easy to permit a tiny house like this. This is my house. I lived in my house for 2.5 years in Sonoma County, unincorporated area. I'm hooked up to water, electric, and sewer. I live on the lower acre of a 2-acre property with the main house on the upper part of the property. It's $500 to get a permit to do this. And you do have to submit drawings, but it's really easy to get through the PRMD to do one of these. The thing is that you have to be disabled or a caregiver. Or now, currently, just now, we have a farm worker. We allow for farm workers to permit these yearly, along with disabled persons and caregivers. This is a safe unit to live in. This happens to be certified as a recreational vehicle, but the International Housing Code, just 6 months ago, passed zoning or building code that allows these to be done on foundations. Sonoma County can adopt that zoning and building code. Sonoma County can open this code.
Thank you. I need you to wrap that up.
To everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y.N. Trong, followed by Krista Albury.
I'm going to read a couple of quotes from articles. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Bank of North Dakota, a public bank run by the state of North Dakota, is more profitable than Goldman Sachs or J.P. Morgan Chase. This public bank has been seen record profits for almost 15 years. A public bank is able to lend at a lower rate than because its costs are very low. Public banks save millions that are usually paid in fees to Wall Street banks. These savings can be used to fund projects such as infrastructure and housing. The Bank of North Dakota is able to make 2% loans to local communities for infrastructure, half or less the rate paid by local governments in other states. Since 50% of the cost of infrastructure is financing, the state can cut out infrastructure costs, but in half by financing through its own bank, which can return the interest to the state. Okay, so that's the end of the quotes. The profits and potential local benefits are so high, and the need for funding is, for rebuilding is so acute. It's not a question of if Santa Rosa starts a public bank, but when. If another city, such as Oakland, starts a public bank first, then the city of Santa Rosa stands to lose all that profit that it would make by running its own public bank.
Thank you. Krista Albury, followed by Peter Cherneff, followed by Kalia Musseter.
Hello, thank you. I just want to bring some awareness. Ooh, Representative Hopkins, don't leave. This is for you. Sorry.
I think she has to use the bathroom.
Sorry.
Okay, just hang out for a second, yeah.
Of how this homeless problem is affecting my little corner of the world out in Forestville. So as of this morning, we have multiple dilapidated RVs, people living in broken down cars on my street if you go in between Steelhead Beach and Mirabelle Road. And we have human feces on the side of my street, along with trash. And just this morning, 4 houses, mine included, had tampered mailboxes. I don't know how many more. So just a few suggestions right off the top of my head, and please tell me if they've already been done or if people have more suggestions. I'd love to hear about it at the end of the meeting. But if there could be subsidization for landowners that have open space that could house people in tents or their RVs. Another suggestion is to provide vouchers for people with RVs and their cars to use at established campgrounds. So maybe that's already happening, but those are just 2 ideas off the top of my head. But we need something done right now to get us through the winter. We need a plan right now. So please, after the meeting, if anybody has any ideas, please let me know, and let's put a plan together. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Cherneff. I think he left. Kalia Musseter? One of those, hopefully. And she'll be followed by Catherine Moretto Rigout.
So first of all, thank you all for all your hard work for our community. I wanted to talk about a small piece in terms of the homelessness issue, and that piece is stigma, because it animates everything, our priorities and the way that we fund and plan. I had the great privilege of serving at the Annalee shelter during the fire disaster, and the immediate outpouring of generosity and support was astonishing. And after the year we've all had in America, it was so heartening to see that, all that goodness, right, in our humanity. But the response to our neighbors that were homeless previous to the fire was very different. Just one example, at Annalee, there were early in the morning 2 homeless women that showed up at the shelter who did not even feel safe to enter. They didn't feel entitled to be safe. And I think it's hard for those of us that are housed to realize that our previously homeless neighbors were profoundly impacted by the fire as well. And I want to just offer this framing for our shared language and thinking, and that is that it was so natural and effortless for us to express our compassion for people who lost their homes in this dreadful fire, but people who are homeless and trapped outside have lost their housing in a different kind of fire. It is also a fire. And it is primarily composed of significant mental health challenge, but in our new global economy, and particularly since the crash of '08, that our county didn't hit the trough of till 13, it's caused by job loss and medical crisis often. So I just want us to think together about that. Thank you.
Catherine Rigout. Is Catherine here? Colleen Fernald. She'll be followed by Dee Dee Bridges.
Hey y'all, what does highly evolved community and development look like? Government getting the notion that working together effectively, sharing resources, gives you more power and you can do it more effectively, efficiently, affordably? Okay, I don't hear anyone talking about the displaced wildlife, lost their homes, lost their food source. Could it be that if you work really hard to get the land trust type people, open space, go buy up those parcels everywhere you can, try to find a way to get a good deal, maybe if it's just parcel by parcel in those hillsides you weren't supposed to develop in? Okay, some people here like Miguel and Jay Schaefer and I were already, I put out the challenge, Green Tiny House Building Guild. Labor people, can you help with that? Now, I learned that Redwood Credit Union and Exchange Bank, the only 2 places really to put your money around here, don't have tiny home loan programs. Can you help? Can public-private partnership look like highly evolved community development? Now, I could have had a $500,000 property paid off by now had I not given it all away to rent. I don't have the big down payment, but I have consistent monthly payment. I don't have great credit, but what if you help, all of you, create this partnership? You own the land, maybe it's park land for people who don't want to be in high density areas. You got the hookups, a new kind of village model, kind of communal, right? And eventually, I'm paying off my tiny home loan. I can drive away to my own property to go buy, right?
Thank you, Mr. Fernald.
Lots of models. Glad
Dee
to
Dee
see you working
Bridges.
together. Thank you.
Dee Dee will be followed by Victoria Yanez. Victoria Yanez, followed by Bonnie Petty.
Time for everybody to wake up. Hello. Thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay. Well, I came in and I said I had a question right away, and it was because of a presentation that some of the first presenters were giving, where they had stated the numbers of people displaced. My question is, were the homeless, were the people who did not have roofs that were burnt out, are those numbers among the displaced? Because from my reports, and I'm representing Homeless Action, sort of, I'm in Homeless Action, but I'm representing the homeless people. USERP, the Union of Santa Rosa Houseless Persons and Pets. So We're interested in what was the treatment of the homeless evacuees, because don't forget, we have been under a homeless emergency for almost a year, and what has happened? Nothing. We had Ian DeJong last January telling us homeless housing first. Well, all we've gotten was jails first, and nobody has mentioned the policy of the city in bulldozing homeless encampments rather than providing for the homeless. So I wanted to read scriptures and all this stuff, you know, but we don't have time for those niceties.
Thank you, Ms. Yanez. You need to wrap up, please.
Okay, all I want to say is we should not be responding by giving people prison bars rather than house keys.
Thank you very much. Bonnie Petty, followed by Steve Bertlebow.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Petty, and I'm with North Bay Jobs with Justice. I live in the Santa Rosa Junior College District, and thank you to all of you. I have all these friendly faces. I love seeing all of you guys here together, working together. This is great. So, as you heard from other of my colleagues on North Bay Jobs with Justice, we're very concerned about the workers who are going to be involved in both the debris cleanup as well as the rebuild and recovery. North Bay Jobs with Justice strongly urges the Board of Supervisors and the Santa Rosa City Council to please help provide some kind of oversight and to collaborate with the appropriate federal and state agencies such as FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers, the Department of Industrial Relations, Cal OSHA, to ensure that the compliance with labor, health, and safety and environmental standards are adhered to. We're very concerned that there is no one agency or one place where this is being taken care of, where there's enforcement, and there's no one place for those of us who are kind of trying to monitor and watch for us to report when we see possible violations, and we would like to see some additional publicity to tell people that they need to be working with contractors who are going to hire people, and that people are taken care of and given proper safety equipment, and that they're not going out and victimizing people who have already lost jobs here and hiring them, dragging them out to these sites, dragging them through and having them clean up, and then refusing to pay them and turning them over to ICE if they're immigrants. So, you know, that we just need some reporting agency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Bertlebow, Thomas Ells.
Thank you, Supervisors.
Put that up
and council
closer
members.
to you, Steve. There you go.
That better?
Better.
It's nice to see you all here together, and it's nice to see you on the two issues of rebuilding and homelessness, and I think they are related, and I think we can use the income that we get from insurance to rebuild as a way of hiring able-bodied members of the homeless community. We're going to need to train them, and I would urge that you start tomorrow to make sure that they're capable of doing the work that needs to be done to rebuild. It's always struck me as very strange that when there's a hurricane or a firestorm, the cost of rebuilding all that shows up on the profit side of gross national product. But here I am today saying, okay, we've gotten lemons, let's make some lemonade. The last word that I would say is that you formed a committee, ad hoc, to deal with the issue of rebuild and homeless. Let's remember that there are several other cities that are involved in homeless issues, and that they need to be part of the approach to homeless. Petaluma particularly has a very good system we can learn from. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Ells, he'll be followed by Kimberly Carr.
I want to thank everyone who spoke previously. Hopefully you can hear me for their eloquence. I'm going to speak to some of the details. Because of the primacy of protecting the environment and to prevent climate change, as well as to protect the urban lands, It's necessary to look at the fire mitigation element of the general plan, and it must address community-wide fire prevention measures of developed water and not further urbanization in those areas of the county particularly, but also in the city. Larkfield Wickiup needs funded fire and transit with development targeted away from 101 corridor. New zoning and planning efforts need to be made across the entire city and county together, please. The collective impact model or action model is an economic model of game theory used to disenfranchise the majority. I'd recommend that you not use that title of collective action or collective model. Please consider those. I want to thank everybody. The people talk about public banking. It's very important. Shelter crisis, all that's included in the planning, state planning code. We need to look at that and use that. We don't have to comply with all the specific codes. Tiny homes and foundations is a really great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Kimberly Carr. She'll be followed by Kathleen Finnegan.
Hi, Kimberly Carr, Tips from Survivors and RVs Without Borders. I haven't met the folks here in the city of Santa Rosa, but I look forward to doing so in the near future. I've been very impressed with the professionalism and leadership at the county level, and even occasionally humor. I wanted to bring up some out-of-the-box thinking, which is that financing our future based on increasing property values is wrong. Speculation on real estate increases our housing costs and homelessness. We are all on this bus and headed for a cliff. The chart shown by the CDC is showing how dysfunctional our housing market is by the number of participants that are unsatisfied with the solutions. There is another way to pay for infrastructure and city services. I lived in Europe for several years, and they have transaction taxes on their housing, so there is less speculation and a 12% tax on housing. This creates a more stable economy. You want out-of-the-box thinking? I haven't heard anyone speak of that here today, so I'm offering you this as a possibility to consider. Control housing prices, reduce homelessness, create transaction taxes. Please think about it. RVsWithoutBorders.org.
Thank you. Kathleen Finnegan, followed by Anita LaFollette.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Finnegan. I live in Santa Rosa. We've long had an elephant in the room in the form of 3,000 human beings who have no home in this beautiful county. Really, nothing has been done. And it's time. We have a crisis that's been expanded exponentially now. But I suggest that we all want to see our public spaces respected and clean, and our private properties respected and clean. But homeless people who have no other recourse to carry out life-sustaining activities have no place to go. And so I would like to make a couple of respectful demands, immediate demands. Number one, stop criminalizing the homeless for behavior that they have no help to carry out. Provide immediately trash collection, portable toilets, and hand washing facilities to these people. For God's sakes, let us not wait until we get an outbreak of hepatitis, as has been seen in other cities in this state. For heaven's sakes, do this now. It will make a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita LaFollette.
Good evening. Thanks for hearing me and having this forum. I want to let you know I left the fairgrounds the other day. I was helping out, and I ran into an old lady on the corner. She was in a wheelchair, 87 years old. They just let her out of the fairgrounds. Her husband was gone to get her something to eat for dinner. They're homeless right now out there, and they probably found a tree somewhere to lay under or something. 87 years old. So I want to put a plug out for people who are homeless, and it's always what I heard last night, 69% are mental health issues. And those are the ones that have a hard time paying the rent, right? So that's why they're out there. I guess you know that. So I want to propose that you take this money, however much you can get, and send it to APS, because I'm putting reports for all these people who are sick and elderly, and they should get the homes first, because I can't imagine an 87-year-old woman, and I hope it's not myself, God forbid, out in this weather without a home. Without shelter is bad enough, but without a home, you have no place to go to. And thanks for hearing me.
Thank you. Elaine Holtz. Elaine? And that's the last card I have.
My name is Elaine Holt. I'm a 40-year resident of Sonoma County, and I was not going to speak, but I listened and listened and listened and felt compelled to say something.
Stay close to that microphone, Elaine.
Pardon? Oh, there we go. There but for fortune go you or I. And one of you, my dear friend Susan Gorin, lost her home, and my heart goes out to her, believe me. Also, there are ramblings that this whole fire could have been prevented. You know, it's very interesting, some of the things that I've been reading. It's kind of scary to me. I think it's important that we listen to the public, number one. We listen to the environmentalist. I went to a meeting that the climate organization put on, and I heard so many good ideas, I couldn't believe it. Listen to the environmentalist. Don't listen to the suits. I'm a retired corporate sales manager. I know what they're like. Their bottom line is money. Money. You know, you guys, I have to say, did one of the best jobs. I listened to that radio. I heard Julie, I heard Chris, I heard all of you. I felt so confident and so proud of my community that we came together the way we came together. I was 2.5 miles from Coffey Park, and I was lucky. I didn't lose my home, but I know I have friends personally, and I know how it feels. So my suggestion is, listen to the public, listen to the environmentalist. Please quit wasting our time. Give the public more than 1.5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Elaine. You got more than 1.5. That is all the cards I have. Chairwoman Zane, would you like to ask your board if they have any final comments?
Yeah, any final comments from the board? They're shaking their heads. Yes.
The hour is late. I appreciate meeting with the council, and I appreciate all of you from the public who stayed this late to comment. We are working together.
So here, I have here. She said she appreciates everybody who stayed here late, and we are working together. I just have 3 things I want to leave us with. First of all, it's been wonderful to sit here at the table with all of you. It really has been delightful and hopeful. And I hope that we as leaders be able to do 3 things as we move forward. And the first is that we remain hopeful, because these are challenging times, and we're leaders, and we've got to be hopeful for our constituents. And then the second, that we continue to work united, that we be united in our vision, that we be united in our cause to recover and rebuild our community. And then thirdly, the last thing, we have to hold a long-term vision for the community. That's our moral responsibility as leaders, to paint and hold that long-term vision. It's more than just getting together tonight or one day or 1 week or planning for the next 3 months as we remove our debris from the community. It is really a long-term vision much farther into that future. And I'm looking forward to doing that with all of you as team members, because none of us can do it by ourselves. And I want to thank the mayor for his leadership too, and thank our incredible staff who make us look good every day. If you don't, you'll hear about it. Thanks.
Council, any final comments? Ms. Combs.
Thank you. And I also want to thank the Board of Supervisors for joining us here, to thank the public for coming forward and speaking with us. I do want to assure you that I believe we are all very interested in listening to you. In fact, I think listening is an important factor going forward now as people are hitting the sort of hard part of rebuilding. I learned the origin of the word conspire recently. Conspire means to breathe together. Conspire. And I'm hoping that as a group, we all in the room can conspire to recover together as a city and as a county. And I really want to thank everyone for the energy that they're bringing to that breath of being together. Let's conspire to do this right. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we first talked about this meeting about 6 months ago. It took a long time to get this together. I know that we had a million reasons we could have come up with not to have this meeting tonight, but I think it's really important. Important for us to all be co-conspirators, and for the public to help us along the way. We are listening, and it's good for all of us to be here listening together. I just want to ask all of you to make sure that this is not a one-off meeting. It's not easy. We're all out of our comfort zone in this format, but it's valuable. And we have a couple of ad hocs now that are going to be meeting, but we need to meet as two complete boards and council as well. So tonight we talked about the three most important issues in my mind, and I think probably in all of our minds, that face the city and the county right now. These aren't going to go away. I'm not going to go away, and we're not going to go away. So with that, I don't expect that you will. So with that, we're going to go away for the night, and we'll see you all soon.
Good night and good luck. What's his name say? Good luck and good night. You know what I'm talking about. Oh, hi, Susan. I'm sorry.